Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 16th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. First item on the agenda this evening, councillors, is the adoption of the minutes of that meeting held on October 2nd, 2017. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Beale, seconded by Councillor Salter. Are there any errors or omissions? Deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The next item is the agenda of October 16th council meeting be approved. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Burden. Again, any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. We have one presentation this evening, and we have the Parksville Downtown Business Association Executive Director, Ms. Pam Bottomley, and the City of Parksville Director of Engineering and Operations, Vaughn, to talk to us about the proposed downtown pedestrian wayfinding project. An update. Would you please proceed?
From Mayor Worship, before Council is a verbal report providing Council with an update of the pedestrian wayfinding program. What we'll be doing is providing you with some information on where the program is and ultimately asking for a release of the next $54,000 of the budget that Council had already previously approved. So I'll just get right into the presentation here. Again, we'll go through the milestones of the project. We're on step 2 at the moment, and if Council could turn to the third slide. What you'll see here is step 2 would be the design intent. There was a public information meeting that perhaps you want to touch on, and there's also a city staff workshop. So we'll go through a few of these points with you now.
So our key milestones since we were last here to speak with you and discuss the project, we had a public information meeting, open house, May 30th. It was promoted by email to our members, a news release, posted to both our websites. It was picked up by the PQB News and the Parksville Chamber. Promoted through newspaper ads on May 18th and 25th and our Facebook page. It was attended by 34 people. And Stephen, our consultant from Axia Creative, was there, and Vaughn was there all day, and other city staff were there. And the VIU students working on the Community Park Master Plan were in attendance as well. We supported that meeting with 8 detailed information panels and a slideshow, which illustrated the project overview, purpose and benefits, design inspiration, the assessment process, types of wayfinding devices and their proposed locations, and wayfinding programs in similar communities. And we provided a handout on the benefits for people who in attendance. The key feedback, the public in attendance was very interested and engaged on the topic. It was a very good discussion with the community. They wanted to ensure that sign messaging was consolidated, which indeed our program does do, to use international graphic symbols, which we do. There was a few sidebar issues, as you can appreciate, like more sidewalks and walking areas, an overhead walkway over the highway, and allocating more funds to the city parks. But one key recommendation is that there needs to be somewhere to direct RVs to park in the summer, because they take up multiple spots, anywhere from the very important liquor store to the post office to grocery stores and other small plazas where they're not really, they're in the way. So the other milestone that we've gone through is that 100% design intent drawings have been provided to the City of Parksville for input. That input has been received. The location plan has been developed with feedback from the city. The program presently consists of 50 signs, 19 pedestrian, 16 vehicular, 3 gateway, 2 kiosks, and 10 trail talkers. And you'll recall from the assessment document that you saw a year ago and documents since what all those various device types look like.
And I'll just continue on. The next milestone was city staff workshop. So the city staff workshop took place, and feedback was received. Some of the feedback were concerns with the conflicts with the existing roadway signs. The reflective material should comply with the existing program. It turns out that these signs that are going to be produced by this program will be produced by the same company that the city uses already to produce some more of our complicated signs, so that kind of worked out well. Concerns of vandalism, including graffiti. The signs themselves will have a special coating, is my understanding of it, that makes graffiti a little bit easier to deal with. So that was addressed. 5 proposed pedestrian guide signs will impact the planter baskets, so that's something that we're well aware of. And then when the actual shop drawings come out, when the contractor that's going to be building the signs is selected and the design comes through, that will be addressed at that time, sort of the impact with the planters and how that might work. So.
Another thing that we were able to do was liaise with the Community Park Master Plan team. We know there was some parallel discussions on elements and features proposed or desired for the park. We were happy to know that our thinking is in concert. There's only 2 devices planned under the wayfinding system for the park, an information kiosk and a finger post directional sign. We had some ideas about other things that should be considered pardon me, in the park, including addresses on certain facilities and locations for the sake of emergency vehicle response. That's just, again, a sidebar.
Elaborate on that a little bit. So going forward, we're into step 3 now. So once, I'll just come back a little bit here, a few slides back, if you don't mind, just to kind of. So this milestone chart, it shows this, here we are at the council report. Immediately after this and securing the additional $54,000 from council, the project will go to tender. That'll get us into step 3, which is here, and the fabrication and installation. So in this process, the contract gets awarded, the signs are designed, the finishes, the city staff will have a look at the samples. There'll be a workshop that's showing the staff what the shop drawings are going to look like, the actual manufactured configuration of the signs. And then once the city staff kind of give the thumbs up, then it goes into fabrication and ultimately sign installation for this phase 1 of step 3. So step 3 is a fabrication installation, and it's designed to go in 3 different phases. This is the first phase. So there's the city's portion of $54,000 that we're looking for approval for tonight to draw on. This is phase 2. So in phase 2,
excuse me, Councillor Patterson, you have a question?
Thank you. Just for clarification, just before we started on this page, you mentioned that you'd already selected someone that the city deals with already. Was that that's not the signage portion, that's the...
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Patterson, what I was mentioning was that the contractor that's going to be manufacturing the signs is the same contractor as the city's been using in the past.
So the contract's already been awarded then?
Has not.
The only supplier for the reflective material that is to standards that are required, or it's only supplied by that one company?
Okay, thank you for the clarification. That's what I was...
Yeah, it's just a supplier of a material.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
yeah. My apologies. So in phase 2 of step 3, that'll happen in 2018. It's another fabrication installation rollout. The city will be asking at that time, or the program will be asking at that time for the release of the next 47,000, and then the final step, phase 3, that'll be in 2018, 2019, and that'll be the final installation to complete the project. So another $47,000 release. Yep.
What we've added since we last spoke is because of the Jensen Street upgrade and the timing, we've added an element to the Greenway Trail, because that's going to be a decision point, that wide spot there, that we're going to try to coordinate that with the construction as it proceeds, so that we're ready to install something there. Yeah, this is the location map that's going in the tender package. You've all received before what these elements mean, like the T1s, for example, that's a trail talker, P2, etc., K1 in the park. You can see that there's only 2 elements in the park, so there isn't a concern about a proliferation of signage. Some of this is going to be consolidation of signage. We're not impacting any city branding in the park or any interpretive signs in the park. But this whole system carries the branding of the PDBA. Yeah, we are going to be tendering the design drawings for the large proposed gateway signs at either end of downtown on the Island Highway, and a smaller one, just sort of a reface of the one at Jensen and Alberni, because the scale is better for a smaller sign there. But we would really like to sorry, I do have the cold. The large signs that we were also excited about last year, we're going to get a price on those to make sure that we can indeed consider those going forward.
And that's all we have for now. So we're basically open for questions, and ultimately we'd like to get approval for a $54,000 release.
Okay. Questions for members of the delegation, Councillor Beal and Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. I'm just curious with the location plan, because I don't see a legend here, and I know that some of this was being explained, but I'm just curious as to some of them I can figure out, but what are the different colors or the acronyms? You know, is it phases, or can you just go through those?
The whole design document we don't have with us, because we have gone through it before at other locations with you. We have some elevation drawings we can show you of the various device types. This is the this is a G1 gateway. I realize this is kind of some cross-referencing to be done here, but this is a G1 gateway. That's the one for Jensen and Alberni, which is basically a reface. Those are examples of the vehicular signs. Again, another vehicular sign. It's a V. I can't read that.
Overhead
V2.
Guide V2.
Yes, sorry. I'm not an engineer. I see drawings and I go, okay.
Vehicular guide V3. This would be one that's attached to a typical decorative streetlight now.
Yeah, an existing post, and you can see the new banners, which I'm about to order this week.
It's important to note, too, that all the messaging, the names that are going to be on the signs have all been vetted through our community.
And again, those are P4 parking. That's one decision that the city needs to make yet, is what it wants to call its parking lots, if they want them numbered or lettered, etc. And also where you want RV parking to be located, because we need to direct those vehicles somewhere. These are P1 pedestrian guides, P2 pedestrian guides with a device embedded in them that shows where north is, because it's called a cardinal mark. It's actually really hard, if you're new to town, to know where north is, because the naming of the streets and the highways and all that doesn't help. This is the one for the park. The one proposed for the greenways at the top left, that's our initial idea of, we foresee a lot of usage on that trail and a lot of opportunities for people to gather and decide where they're going to go next. The kiosk information is shown at the bottom left. That's a K1. And these are the trail talkers, getting people to circulate and explore downtown. There's more in store as a tagline for this. There's a QR code that takes people to our business directory. The only locations that are going to be mentioned on the devices are destinations. We're not doing advertising. We're not sending people to any particular enterprise. So those are the trail talkers, the T1s. Does that help, Mary?
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm really happy to see that it's moving forward. And it's my understanding that everything's working well with staff and it's moving right along. At this point, I'd like to make a motion to release the next installment in the amount of $54,000 for the second phase. Now, clarify, is this the second or the first phase? Step 3, phase 1. Release the $54. Step 3, phase 1 in the Wayfinding program.
So you seconded that, Councillor Owens. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you for your presentation. So I'm just wondering, with your kiosks, is that going to actually direct people around the city, basically?
The information, it's just an information kiosk. Can we go back to the drawing for the K1? You had it. Yeah. Bottom left, that's both sides of this information kiosk, and it's a drawing of what it would look like. And there's going to be 2 of them, one by excuse me, McMillan and the highway, and one in the park near the gazebo washroom area.
So I'm curious, because when I see that you're putting up, it looks like 50 signs or 49, 50 signs, and you've got the kiosks here to direct folks. So if people are looking for the beach, or they're looking for whatever, a place to go in Parksville, now they can just go to the kiosk or read the signs, and then they can get there. So I just wonder, I know people have been going to the Chamber of Commerce to get directions, so is that going to impact the Chamber of Commerce now? Will you need maps anymore? Or how's that going to?
Councillor Burton, go ahead.
No, it's probably going to enhance. We've also got some plans as far as moving things away from the visitor center and providing information out in the community. The visitor centers are learning that people have cell phones and other devices that they use to find ways around when they're visiting communities, and we want to make sure that we serve that need. So it's not going to impact us. It's a complementary service rather than anything else.
Any further questions on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, so that one opposed? Okay, thank you. So that motion carries, and we'll see you again as time moves on. Okay, thank you. Lots of things in there. Okay, I'm going to put mine down there. There's no money. So we have 3 delegations tonight as opposed to a presentation. And the first delegation is, I'm going to call it the WOW delegation, because Councillor Oates and I attended this Parksville Beach Festival Society success on Friday afternoon. And Cheryl Dill, with her colleague, showed up with a stack of envelopes with all kinds of checks in it. So come and tell us about it. It was great. Lots of happy people and lots of donations to organizations that work under the radar in our fair city and in the whole Oceanside area that got a whole whack of money. So welcome.
Hopefully we do have an internet connection. The old glasses on. Not sure if it's explain. Hardwire. Which one do you usually use here? This one? Sure. Okay. Well, we were going to pull up the Parksville Beach Fest website, but I don't know that it's great. Okay. There, it's working now. I'll do my best. Let's just see. Okay. Apologies for the delay, and thank you very much, Your Worship and Council, very grateful to be here and to share some great news about the 2017 Parksville Beach Fest Society's events. And I do have a handout as well, so I'm not sure whether I should distribute that now or then wait until after. Yeah? Attending with me this evening is Karen Eakins, and she's the treasurer for Parksville Beach Festival Society. And my name is Cheryl Dill, as our mayor has noted, and I am the president for Parksville Beach Festival Society, and it's great, gives me great pleasure to serve in a volunteer capacity to an organization that does great work for this community, lots of fun, and I'd like to share just some updates on how Parksville Beach Festival Society has been doing for the past few years, and the kind of contributions that we're happy to make to our community. So the handout that Karen has highlights just a little bit of an overview of where we've come from and where we are statistically in terms of attendance and our contributions to our community from an economic and social perspective, and then also where we'd like to go. So I'll just provide, within the time that remains, a little bit of an overview there. Many of you probably are aware that Parksville Beach Festival, or it used to be called Sandcastle Days, originated in 1982, and it was a one-day event, the sand sculpting itself, out on the beach during low tide. But of course, Mother Nature takes the sculptures away in one day. She does amazing work, by the way. And the Sandcastle Days usually was a weekend experience, on a long weekend. There are a variety of other events on that weekend, but that was it. It was a one-day weekend or a one-day event with a long weekend of other activity. It has evolved. In 2000, Parksville Beach Festival Society was constituted, and what we decided to do is focus on sustainability of the event and focus on family-friendly events to ensure that risks were managed, and we were able to develop the event into an international event that people traveled from all over the world to see and also participate in. So we've been very successful with that. Many of you have noticed what's happening on the beach is that it's a 5-week exhibition featuring an opening weekend competition where there are 29 sculptors involved, and we get applications, way more applications than we can hold at that particular site at the beach. And the applications are from master sculptors or people who are becoming classified as master sculptors. They're part of an international sand sculpting circuit, and we're part of that main circuit. And we, in 2010, qualified as a World Sand Sculpting Championship qualifying event. So we're really proud of the growth that we've had with this event. And we just wanted to share some of that growth. One of the things that I wanted to draw your attention to is that our attendance in the last, I'd say since, 2008, we have it here. I just put some numbers together for you. Our growth has really increased in the past 5 years especially. But since 2010, 9 and 10, when we decided to pursue a title sponsor, which enabled us to hire event management services to sustain our event from human resources capacity, we have grown by 91%. We have over 130,000 people attending this event over the 5 weeks. And so you can see that we have an upward trend in attendance. For the longest time, we were around 50 to 60,000 prior to 2008. Between 2000 and 2008, we were much lower. And that sustainability of having some human resources who are not only just our volunteer capacity, but hiring an event management team really did help us grow and sustain our event. In addition to that, in the past 2 years, we've maintained 130,000 or more, and we feel that we're really in a good place to continue building upon our success and our sustainability, and we want to thank the City of Parksville for your support We really enjoy working closely with the city staff, and it has been really beneficial to us to understand the needs of what we are required to do within the park and to foster that environmental sustainability of that site. Without that, we don't have an event, and without the support from the city, it's very challenging. So we're very, very grateful for that support. One of the things that we're really proud of is that from a sustainability point of view, economically, how we sustain ourselves is through not only sponsorship with our title sponsor and several other business sponsors. We have over 100 business sponsors. We accept gate donations, and our gate donations contribute to the majority of our revenues and support us and sustain us as an organization. Because we're a not-for-profit society, we are committed, and we have a policy that we identify 25% of our gate proceeds that we wish to give back to the community by investing in community projects. And the gate ambassadors, who put in over 2,700 of person hours each year, so 113 shifts of 4 hours per shift. We have over 150 volunteers, so together that's 2,700 volunteer hours that they contribute to our event. And so as a result, we take a portion of those gate proceeds and give that back to the community. So, Your Worship, you mentioned about our event on Friday where we gave $62,000, $62,150 to be precise, back to 24 philanthropic groups in this community, and we're incredibly impressed on Friday. Many people had tears in their eyes when we heard about what that money was going to do, how those funds pay it forward to contribute to community growth and development. We know that that money is going to help in our community single moms, cancer patients, support search and rescue endeavors, seniors housing, help curling clubs and lawn bowling clubs and sorority groups grow and develop and give back to our community, help students in need, support their education endeavors. We're incredibly proud to support these kind of philanthropic groups. I did want to show you that we have contributed over $557,000 since 2000. Since the year 2000, as a society, we've given that much back. And just in the last 5 years alone, we have given over $250,000. I think my chart here doesn't really explain that very well, but the growth and the amount of money that we've given back in the last 5 years has been a very strong upward trend. So we're really, really proud of that, and we endeavor to continue with that as a society. I also want to just remind people that one of the things that we've been able to do is not only support these philanthropic groups who volunteer with us, but also contribute to signage in the community, such as the Exit 51 sign, the entrance sign into the community park, and support the building of the gazebo in the park. On that trend, one of the things that we've developed as a plan for ourselves is we want to we've been looking at how successful we've become in terms of other events that we host during our competition and exhibition. I just thought I'd bring up a couple of pictures while I'm talking, so just to remind you of some of the creations from this year. But one of the things that we've noticed is that our music events are becoming more and more popular. And we'd love to continue doing that, and we take a portion of our proceeds every year and contribute to that, so that it is a free summer concert series on Friday and Saturday evenings in the park. The challenge that we have with that is that the site where we host the music is not quite conducive to performances for not only the performers but also the audience. There's no green room, there's no place for them to get ready, washrooms are not close by. We're incredibly grateful for use of the picnic shelter, that's where it is, but it has its limitations. So what we'd love to do is we would love to support the creation of a performance facility. And for the last several years, we've been putting some of those gate proceeds aside to contribute to a fund that we would restrict for performance facility creation. And we've identified on this handout for you what some of the guiding principles that we'd like to use in development of that performance facility in the park. So it's a performance stage that we'd love to see a green room in, public washrooms for the performers. We'd love for it to have power built in, elevation slightly above the audience so that the performers are raised, that the stage is 30 by 20 at minimum, and that there's underground wiring and conduit for sound located on a sheltered cement pad further out from the performance stage. Guiding principles are things like we'd love to see it respect the park environment. It's an absolute number one. Provide effective sound and lighting, provide shelter for performers, provides a multi-purpose function for not only Parksville Beach Festival Society, but several other users of the park and various groups, Canada Day, you name it. We need a stage that's adequate for those things. It would be a facility that would enhance community pride and enable capacity for audiences of at least 1,000 or more. So that's what we'd love to contribute to as a society. We'd love to work with city and council and staff. We know that that's essential, and other groups, but we wanted to just plant the seed, let you know that what we're working hard at, and we feel that it would be a great contribution. We respect the community master plan process. We did provide some input earlier this year with the researchers, the VIU team, and we're happy to be reviewing the results of that, and we'd like to contribute to that on October 28th and provide some more input. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I was going to ask you to, before I ask members of council for their comments and questions, the overall economic ripple effect is awesome. You have in your report here, I think it says $18 million.
Yes, yeah, there was a study that we did in 2016. Thank you.
That's the bigger picture. Thank you. Members of council, questions for the delegation? I think everybody's speechless. You have a question? Okay.
No, I don't have a question so much as a comment. I wanted to say what an honor it is for me to be the liaison to this committee. There's such a hard-working committee that represents not only the city of Parksville but the entire Oceanside area. They're dedicated to a fault, and it's an honor for me to be there. This Beach Fest requires 12 months of planning. I know there's a meeting tomorrow night, and we'll be starting the planning process, or they'll be starting the planning process for next year's event. I'll tell you, the event that was here on Friday is something that you should do yourself a favor and come and see that, because it's one of those things that makes you feel good about what's happening. The money that was given back to those groups, one of the things that Beach Fest asked those folks to do at that presentation is to give a brief outline of what they're going to use the funds for. And, you know, I can't name them all, but some of the things that came up were seniors housing, the school lunch program, which is a shame we actually have to fundraise for something like that, but the school lunch program, the therapeutic riding, the Forward House, in particular, I want to identify Forward House, because not only does it provide them with some funding, it provides the residents at Forward House an opportunity to come out and actually work the gate there. And the representative at Forward House mentioned that to us when they got their check, that was one of the things that one of the benefits for that particular group. And I think that's, you know, it's one of those things that you don't actually recognize as one of the benefits that happens, but when you involve people in the community, good things happen. And one of the other things that was very noteworthy, quite a few of the groups, I mean, there was the Lions, the Rotary, the Elks, the Sigma Psi, and too many, I would forget some, so I'm not going to try to mention them all. But quite a few of those groups, they took their funding and then donated it down the line to somebody else. So there was quite a few groups that said, out of our money, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to buy these things for our group, and then with what's left over, we're going to donate it to Forward House or SOS and all those things. So I want to say two things. It's an honor to work with you. It's hard to keep up with you guys, but it's an honor to work with you, and it's a lot of gratitude I want to express for the contribution back to the community. The event that was here on Friday, there were times here when people had a tough time holding back the emotions, and so I look forward to that continuing on, and thank you very much for what you've contributed to our community.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any further comments or questions from anybody? I can't say enough, and I think that Councillor Rhodes gave an excellent description of what went on. We should maybe film that ceremony, because it's probably worthwhile to give everybody an idea of where that money goes, and we could put that on our website. But I can't say enough. I can't congratulate you and all of your volunteers for the work that you do. It's tremendous, and it gives further proof that without volunteers we'd be nowhere fast. So thank you once again, and we'll take to heart your comments. I guess we have to listen to you now. You're serious people, so and we will. So we'll be in touch as the Community Park Master Plan moves along. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Okay, the next delegation we have are the Friends of French Creek Conservation Society, who are going to come and talk to us about Hamilton Marsh. And I recognize the speakers. Welcome. Lynne, I'm sorry, I forget your Ceri. Yeah, Ceri. We deal with other stuff on other boards together. Hamilton Marsh, a great spot. Thank you.
So just before we start, how many of you have never been to Hamilton Marsh?
How many have been?
Have never been to Hamilton Marsh. Anybody going to admit? Everyone has been there? Oh, well, we're going to give you a cyber tour, so you're going to feel like you've been there again.
Okay, good.
I had it set up to play a video, and does the audio feed through the laptop into the system?
Don't look at me. Anybody but me.
Okay. Here we go. Hamilton Marsh. Do we have a problem? Just take me a moment. No, go to YouTube. Right, here's our video.
You want us to dim the lights?
That would be wonderful.
Okay, somebody want to dim the lights, please?
Is there a techie among us? Here we go.
Right now we're in a beautiful woodland that surrounds Hamilton Marsh. Here just about 5 minutes away from Qualicum Beach. The woodland area that is here around the marsh is about 360 hectares. The marsh itself is about 36 hectares. The woodlands around it protects it from wind, it gives creatures habitat for breeding, for food gathering. Connectivity, also known as wildlife corridors, are extremely important so you don't get what's called a genetic sink, where there's just a small... Right now we're in a beautiful woodlands that surround Hamilton Marsh, here just about 5 minutes away from Qualicum Beach. The woodland area that is here around the marsh is about 360 hectares, and the marsh itself is about 36 hectares. The woodlands around it protects it from wind, it gives creatures habitat to be able to go in and out of the marsh, using it for nesting, for breeding, for food gathering. connectivity, also known as wildlife corridors, are extremely important so you don't get what's called a genetic sink, where there's just a small pool of animals breeding and inbreeding and interbreeding and not having anywhere to out-migrate, not having fresh genetic material coming in with new creatures that arrive. Places like Buttertubs are pretty much landlocked. Well, Hamilton Marsh, the area we're in right now, used to be called the Little Hamilton Marsh. This is the remnant of a much larger marsh. In BC, about 71% of the wetlands have already disappeared or been destroyed, damaged beyond use for wildlife. Communities are starting to realize, whoa, there are a lot of ecological benefits that come from the natural filtration and the water storage that marshes provide at no charge. They retain rainwater and they slowly let it out when there's a flood. During droughts, it's a source of water still for all kinds of wildlife. The water remains in the soil for a long time in a marsh, which makes it very valuable for people if they're depending on groundwater in the local area, or to have cleaner rivers and streams. And with all of the forests around it, it's a huge carbon sink. Many people are very concerned about the condition of our planet environmentally. Here's an opportunity to protect an area that is important for all of us, for the community, for wildlife, and for the future.
We have a value of connecting children with the region that they live in and the land that we live on. Through our eco-studies, we have connected with Ceri Peacey and the team from Hamilton Marsh, and we are plugging our kids into this local ecosystem and teaching them the importance of it, and it's actually grown into something bigger than expected because the kids are so eager to dig in and be ambassadors for this area. We learn through our senses what things sound like, what things feel like, what things smell like. And when we are in the marsh, you can hear the different bird species, you can pick the berries, you can experience what this is like, rather than just being in a desk, in a class, full of distractions, and having to remember it to regurgitate it for a test.
Today at Hamilton Marsh, I was looking for bugs and fish, and I found a newt, and it was like this big. It was just so exciting. I would like to come here over and over and over and over and over again.
It was fun, and I like to collect the berries and eat them. It was back swimmers, dragonfly larvae, regular mosquito larvae. My friend found a newt, and my other friend found a big tadpole.
My name is Hans Borger. I'm a retired biologist, and I've been coming to this marsh now for about 15 years. My background is in aquatic entomology, and hence I'm drawn to the very high number of species of insects that are found in Hamilton Marsh. Probably of all the marshes, all the wetlands here on the east coast of Vancouver Island, this has more aquatic insects in it than any other one I've ever looked at. Wherever I find an opportunity, I try and bring out school children to local areas. And as you saw with these children, they were already keyed up. They actually taught me a few things. We know that every year there's another group of people that learn about the marsh, and once they learn about the marsh, they come back. As you can see, the trail is extremely well used. Having the boardwalk here makes it kind of nice to get out onto the marsh. Island Timberlands, the owners, have been very good at allowing public access to this area. I hope they will continue to do so. If you find a dozen different species, you know that the marsh is pretty well unpolluted. And Hamilton Marsh up to now is in an excellent condition, and I like to see, hopefully, that it's kept that way.
I think it's really important for the general public to get an idea that A, it exists, and B, the benefits. This is the largest body of water in the French Creek watershed. We are getting a lot drier on Vancouver Island, so for water alone, it's a good reason to preserve it. Beyond the marsh itself, there are lots and lots of wet spots, and they all contribute to the biodiversity and the size of Hamilton Marsh. So that's why we put a lot of importance on saving the whole 360 hectares, not just 36 hectares and a buffer. The values of Hamilton Marsh cannot be overestimated. A lot of research has gone in recently to the importance of green and nature for psychological health, for physical healing. There's no end of benefits that this kind of forested, beautiful area will do for any human being, let alone the wildlife that depends on it. For me, it's really hard to look up the mountains and see all the habitat that's gone. The thought that that's just going to extend down and human habitat is going to take priority over all, that is what devastates me. And that is where we can't allow that as a society. It will be the end of us. We're running low on old growth forest, and I don't know if we're ever going to have very much left, certainly within these areas. Imagine 20 years from now how much bigger and better this place will be, and how much more there'll be to explore for children. I mean, that's huge. I just think it's smart business to preserve. That's what I think. Preserve it. It can only look good on everyone.
There's no doubt about it. It's a great place. Are you going to be coming to the RDN also?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
RDN and Qualicum.
I know that
too.
we've been discussing that at the Regional Parks and Trails Committee too. Yeah.
We have, just so that you know, the whole community has been trying to preserve Hamilton Marsh for almost, well, over 40 years. So it's been on the radar for a very long time. Of course, private ownership gets in the way sometimes, but our goal as a society and as hardworking volunteers is to preserve the whole 360. I recognize that a lot of people look at you and me and say that's not practical, that's not possible, but I think anything's possible. And I think there just has to be the will and collective effort. It is the largest body of water in the French Creek watershed. There are just so many reasons to preserve it. And I believe Lynne has some kudos to give you.
We just wanted to say, too, it was just a stroke of genius to have protected the Ermineskin land up here. It's important for Parksville for so many different reasons. For the water source, for the local community. There's a high school right there, an elementary school right on the other side of it. It's just a perfect place. That was really a master stroke to protect that. So we know you folks are already aware of the importance of watershed areas, and especially the wetlands that are within them. This has been a long effort, as Ceri said, over 40 years trying to preserve and protect that area. It's gone through several different ownerships. The danger is always that if it were cut as a lumber source, it's ruined for another 150 years or so. So it's important. It's a matter of there being a willing seller or not. That's the issue. But there is a lot of interest in the RDN and other places in obtaining it. We'll just have to see. But in the meantime, it's a matter of awareness raising, letting people know it's there, that it's really important for a whole lot of reasons. It's within our own watershed, and there you go. Thank you.
I know that you keep close ties with the forestry company. They've been fairly cooperative, have they not? Or...
Well, to be perfectly frank, yes, they're very good. Like especially for the tours, they give us full permission to do that once a year, which is really great. But as far as actual negotiations go, I keep hearing the phrase in camera, and it's a little challenging. So, but yes, they've been very good. Island Timberlands has been for our tour dates especially. So that's great. I just want to draw your attention, because water is such a big thing. We handed out a handout for compelling reasons to protect Hamilton Marsh. And the French Creek water region is one of the most stressed in the RDN. French Creek and Hamilton Marsh are the two dominant water features in this region. There is high surface water stress and a relatively small amount of surface water storage in terms of groundwater. The region includes two large quadra sands aquifers which run from French Creek water regions into both the Englishman River and the Little Qualicum River regions. These aquifers are also under high stress. Climate change concurrent with increased development is bringing increasing demand and vulnerability to the water supply in the region. Wetlands like Hamilton Marsh, the most significant on this section of the island, play a critical role in water buffering, retention, and groundwater recharge. Their value is being better appreciated these days. I could go on, but you have the document in front of you. That came from a very knowledgeable source. And so, I mean, when I think of Hamilton Marsh, I also think of how much we enjoy birdsong. Well, it's the most prolific waterfowl brood marsh in the area. Over 70 species of dragonfly, and it in itself, even though it's not as bordered in as buttertubs, it is like a real oasis, and to really chunk at it any more than has already been done around it is problematic. And weren't you going to share something about buttertubs?
I spoke with Rob Lawrence. He is one of the directors. He's the planner in the city of Nanaimo, environmental planning. He's in charge of that. And I spoke with him, and he said right now they're working on plans that will cost, he didn't say this, but will cost a fortune. He didn't say how much, to now ameliorate all the damage that's been done over the years to Buttertub Marsh, because it's just basically, there's just a little walking trail around it, around most of it. Houses are right next to it. If you ever are interested in learning about invasive plants and want to practice your ID skills, take a walk around around Buttertub's Marsh. It's a real challenge, and now they're going to be spending a lot of money to try and fix it up a little bit to get it back to a better state. It's a lot easier just to leave things alone. They have a lot of dollar values as far as their environmental contributions that they give to us people as well as wildlife. So we've got a fantastic place there, and we hope that we can obtain it as a park or some sort of protected area in the future.
So I'm definitely going to be seeing you again.
Very soon.
I hope so, and sooner than later. Members of council, any questions for the delegation? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for this. This was really well done, actually. Good on both of you. My question is, if I remember right, was it Island Timberlands that did start to cut, though, in the marsh? And that wasn't that long ago, was it? Was it about 5 years or 6?
We're talking across the road, right?
Yeah.
Yes, they took down a section. There's a wetland at the junction of Highway 4 and Highway 19, and they took it down.
And I mean, that used to be the cutoff area, wasn't it? Like the cutoff to get from the Coombs cutoff.
Yes.
Across the street.
Yes, that used to be part of the greater large Hamilton Marsh, and what was left is what's there now. And yes, that was done a number of years ago. And then 2 years ago, there was logging on the corner that was on the Qualicum Beach side of town, that corner that was taken off. So that was really frightening. And there were about, how many, 7, 9 wetlands within that area.
Yeah.
And they were all marked and mapped wetlands right on over. And it was during the nesting season of various raptors also, which was a concern. So, yeah, it can happen.
That. What are the options? I mean, what are the possibilities as far as ever purchasing it? Like, I know you've tried several times now to get it, but it hasn't been successful. Is it Island Timberlands that are holding up, basically?
To our knowledge, that is the case. I know that the Regional District of Nanaimo and Ducks Unlimited and all the partners that were involved in the 2007 effort, they stand ready. They know how amazing it is.
Yeah, I guess, as you know, from what I can see, and from what we see going on out there, certainly we're densifying, faster than marshes are being developed. Which is a pity, but really when we look at our environment, we're looking at marshes, wetlands, whales. I mean, these are all species at risk, old growth, marmots, et cetera, but really in the end, we're going to be the species at risk if we don't do something about this. So it's so important and valuable. So thank you for bringing this forward and getting that information out there.
Thank you. And just as having protected and saved Moorcroft, that will be a place that will be there for many, many generations. It's fantastic. That was just such a wise move. And these are the kinds of places that in future years people will look back and say, thank goodness this was preserved. This is one of those places.
Well, one of the blows about Moorcroft was, like our organization had $200,000 from the Habitat Conservation Trust Fund and many donors standing by to get Hamilton Marsh. So when the negotiations fell through, the money went to that purchase, Moorcroft. And I don't begrudge it, but it hurt a little. And when Lynne makes reference to Little Hamilton Swamp, Little Hamilton Marsh, Big Hamilton Marsh is where Pheasant Glen is. And so if a 36-hectare wetland, which I understand has shrunk, is considered little. I can only imagine what it once was.
Any other members of council? When I look at the French Creek and Hamilton Marsh have been designated by the Ministry of Environment as a sensitive stream under the Fish Protection Act. Low summer flows already threaten salmon and trout populations. That must give you some whack in terms of, trying to protect this and doing something with that. Has the province designated itself that it wants to get involved or help out?
I can't give a fully educated response to that, but I can tell you that I believe the last administration of the province, everything became quite self-regulated, and the teeth came out of things that might have protected before. That's my take on it. So you would hope. And another thing that you don't see here, I don't have a slide up, is that interestingly, not only does it feed the French Creek watershed, but there's one outlet that flows through a farmer's field into a creek that goes into Crocker, Whiskey, and Little Qualicum. So it's a biggie, this.
Okay, well, this is not the end of hearing about Hamilton Marsh. I know you very well, and I sit on other committees with you, so you talk Hamilton Marsh. I'm waiting for a tattoo that says Hamilton Marsh.
There will be T-shirts coming, and we'll be selling them as a fundraiser. We expect you to be the first one in line. That wasn't nice.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck. Okay, my last delegation is a presentation by Hugh Bohm of the Parksville Oceanside Pickleball Club. And just before Hugh speaks, I wanted to point out to the audience, for your information, because we had a presentation by the Oceanside Pickleball Club. And there's a distinction, but they get along just fine. The Oceanside Pickleball Club is for 55 and over. And I think some of those members are in the audience tonight. Am I correct on that? Is somebody? Oh, okay, they're here, yeah. And then the Parksville Oceanside Pickleball Society, the basic difference is they take anybody of any age, including people with physical challenges. So welcome, and over to you, Hugh.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I would have felt more comfortable with the agenda item being called, what can we do to the lacrosse box to make it safer, rather than the byproduct, which is or could be some additional pickleball courts. The lady next to me is Renata Gamel, and she's the first appointed person that we have to our junior pro team. Out of the perhaps 400 people that have introduced to pickleball over the years, she probably has the most potential of all of those. And if she chooses to go on and continue with the sport, I think that you'll see Parksville pickleball synonymous, and you'll hear a lot more about this young lady. She's only 13 years old now.
Could we change it to Pickleballville?
Yeah, this is going to hurt you folks because you're going to need more services as we get these kids going onto this sport. And it is currently the largest growing demographic in the USA, the 12 to 17 year age group. And that's what's going to hit us next. It's just a matter of time. We're the Parksville Oceanside Pickleball Society. We're incorporated under the BC Societies Act with the purpose of supplying pickleball opportunities to people of all ages and abilities, and for the past 2 years on a no-charge basis. We rely on donations, sponsors, and grants to cover essential operating costs. We have a local board of directors. I'm the president of the society. Play tournaments. I'm a certified professional pickleball teacher and the USA Pickleball Association ambassador for Parksville, Qualicum. Youth are changing the game. What I taught in pickleball 3 years ago doesn't resemble what I've been teaching this past year. And it's wonderful to see. It's a good challenge for most of us. The Inclusion Parksville folks, they've been playing with us now for the last 2 years. They would like us to enter them into a new sport in their Special Olympics. They want pickleball included. So we're helping them, we're working with them, and hopefully within 2 years we'll see that turned into reality. We had this young lady that you can see here that's showing me off what all of this wonderful stuff she can do. It is unbelievable. She's from Japan and is taken to the game very quickly. We enjoy being part of the multi-sport venue in Parksville Community Park that we refer to as the Lacrosse Box. We set up 6 portable nets 6 days a week. We also set up 4 portable nets on the tennis courts for 2 afternoons, sometimes 3 per week to accommodate working folks. We now have just over, revised the figure, 312 registered players in our group. And here's the reason I think we're here. The asphalt surface on the lacrosse box offers several challenges, and inconsistent ball bounce is not the significant one, as the numerous falls that our players have recorded over the past 2 years. This season we had 2 players end up with a broken wrist. 1 player dislocated 2 fingers. Dill fractured his hip, and a lady broke her ankle. Raining falls resulted in various abrasions. We go through an orientation program with anybody that joins our club. We tell them what type of footwear they should be wearing. We tell them that they should not be playing on wet courts. And all of these 5 major falls, the courts were dry. There was not a bit of moisture on them. And we just assume that's an accident. The accident happened the first time. The accident happened the second time. By the time it happened the third and the fourth time, we thought, well, we better take a look at this. Something we're doing or something, this is not right. I mean, there's far too much stuff going on here. So we checked with our friends over at the tennis courts and asked them how many serious injuries they had, and there was 0. In the past 2 years, they haven't had one. They have approximately 300 people in their membership. We have just over 300 in ours. And when we sat down and analyzed it in August, we took a look at it in August and we said, something's not right. The only thing that differs between the 2 groups is the surface of the courts. They have the tennis court cover. We have asphalt. And we think that the asphalt is contributing to the falls. Tomco Sports tell us that the surface is similar to that put down in Springwood Park tennis courts last year. However, it's more durable to hold up for lacrosse, basketball, and pickleball. All 3 groups would benefit from a slip-resistant product on damp days. The current surface of approximately 20,000 square feet can be transitioned to a safe and comfortable surface with an application of a product that they call Acrylatex. And this multi-purpose surface coating provides superior traction and a consistent bounce, unlike erratic bounce that we find on asphalt. It also creates a less abrasive surface for future falls, and there will be some. If we had a surface upgrade, we would be able, I'm not pushing for this at all, we'd be able to take the 6 east-west facing courts and convert them into 9 north-south facing courts, adding to our much-needed inventory of courts at a fraction of the cost of building 3 additional courts. And with our 9 courts, coupled with the 8 courts on the tennis court, we'd now be in a position of hosting significantly large pickleball tournaments, resulting in a direct economic benefit to Parksville. I think those of you that are familiar with what financial impact Panthers hockey has had on our economy, I think we can draw a parallel and say that this would happen as well. Players are constantly searching for tournaments staged on quality venues, and they would travel great distances to attend. And I have a group of my friends from Oregon ready to go as soon as we get the courts going. The cost of the coating and finishing of lines for all three programs, that is lacrosse, basketball, and now pickleball. And recently I've noticed that rollerblading hockey is taking off and groups are coming in doing that. And there's some other groups coming in that are playing ball hockey as well on the course. So it really is a diverse group that comes and plays on that surface. I talked with Warren Payne about having this product installed, and he said, unfortunately, I haven't got it in my budget. You need to go to City Council and let them know that you have these concerns. And the price that Warren gave me of putting that product on there is $54,000. That's all I have, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, and I know that it's growing by leaps and bounds. Members of council, any questions for the delegation? Sue? Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. And so when there was doing the public consultation for the Community Park Master Plan, were you involved in that?
Yes.
And did you provide feedback about the court?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, about the surface?
Yes.
No, not at that time we didn't.
Okay, and are you also aware of the other pickleball club that came to us, I think, a month ago? And with the presentation, and we also received a written document saying, because we're trying to have a sport, not a sports center, but where all the sports are going to be located, and they've come up with a proposal to have courts up by Springwood, and it would be 12 courts. And so have you spoke with them as well? Did you know that that's what they were proposing?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. We came together as a pickleball community, and we did a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And out of that, we, as service providers, all agreed that we need to have a minimum of 8 outdoor courts, freestanding courts.
Is that how many? Sorry, go ahead.
And that location in Springwood, we've all had an opportunity to take a look at it, is ideal. But if we draw a parallel to what's happened in Arizona now, in our resort in Arizona, over the last 7 years that I've been involved with our club, we've had 3 expansions. We can't keep up with the demand. When we get to 8 courts, if that's approved by council, I think that we would probably go into a planning session right after that and say we need more.
And so the $54,000 you're looking for now is just to upgrade what you're using right now to make do until the courts are built?
And to make which, I'm sorry?
To make do? Like this, just putting this new topping on it, will just make do until if and when we build other courts?
Absolutely.
And that's what the purpose is?
Yeah. That's I think what we need to do, because even if I'm not sure of what's happening on the tennis courts where we have 8 pickleball courts and OPC use that primarily. But with those 8 courts, if those are still in existence, and our 9, we'd be fine until the new facility is built. But I think that the lacrosse box, the 9 courts on the lacrosse box should continue.
Okay.
Even with that new facility. If I can just draw, again, another example of what we use, I'll wear my other hat now as the ambassador for the USA Pickleball Association. We use, on average, 1 pickleball court for every 40 members that we have. If we use that, and draw that analogy here, we have 800 players approximately now in Oceanside, which would mean that today we should have 20 courts, and we don't. We have 14.
And so have you done any fundraising yourself for the courts?
I'm sorry, I'm really having trouble.
Has your organization done any fundraising towards the courts yourselves?
We haven't, no.
Okay.
But can I say what I shared with you, Your Worship? Is that if there's a tremendous demand right now on indoor courts. And what I see happening is that if we get this 8-court facility built, it'll be used for 5 months of the year. And I mentioned that I have fundraising as part of my background, and I'm glad to fundraise for a seasonal cover over that facility, costing somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000. And then we use that 12 months of the year, 365, 24/7.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation and the information. And I appreciate that at the start you mentioned that it really should have been about improving the surface of the lacrosse box, and that you referred to it as a multi-sport. So my understanding is that this surface would, in fact, from the information here, would be suitable still for lacrosse, and it would be fine for people playing basketball or pick-up ball hockey or anything like that. Is that correct?
Absolutely, okay. Yes.
And I'd just like to add that how much I do appreciate how much that facility is used for drop-in as well as organized. I often go down to the park, and it is very rare to see the lacrosse box empty. There might be 3 little kids in there playing a little bit of ball hockey, or the next time you go by there are people in there with basketballs, and of course during lacrosse season you see people practicing as well as playing the games, and pickleball on the Friday morning. So it certainly is well enjoyed. Now it'll be interesting to see, in my mind, I think it's important to have this information now, but also going forward with the community parks master plan, is the long-term view to have that facility continue, the lacrosse box stay there, as well as going into budget. So I think your timing is very good, and I'm very relieved to hear that you do get together with the other pickleball group and look at that big picture. So thanks for coming, and bonjour Renata. C'est fun de te voir.
Any further questions for the delegation? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. I think it's wonderful that there's a sport that covers all ages, and so there is some place for young people to go and to become engaged and to get active and do things and middle age and seniors and so on. So I think that's a sport that is extremely valuable in this community. When you talk about really what's holding this back, or what's going to hold it back, will be the surface on the courts that you're trying to play pickleball on, or whatever other sport is going on there. So, what I would like, I don't know about the $54,000. I don't know about that amount. I know that you're stating that that's an amount that you received, but I would be interested in making a motion that the city look into what the cost would be to surface that court.
We could do that. I mean, I see this being debated at the budget meetings we're going to start at the end of the month. But
it would be great to have the numbers for us so that we
Mr. Payne's $54,000. That pretty much on the money, I guess.
Yes, that's what he told me.
I know the number is in that neighborhood, but Your Worship, I can't say that it's an exact figure, because I don't know whether that's just product or whether that's product and application. And then there is ongoing maintenance as well that needs to be considered, because that surface requires more maintenance than what an asphalt surface does.
So, I'd like to make a motion then that we get those numbers, so that then when we do debate it, we actually have all of the information in front of us to make an actual decision or not.
Okay, I got a seconder for that. Councillor Beal, any further discussion on that motion? understanding that it'll be brought forward to the budget deliberations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, any further questions for the delegation? Councillor Oates.
No, this is the second time in the last little while now we've had a delegation with respect to pickleball. And my numbers, from what I've heard, from what we've got between 700 and 800 people that are playing this on a regular basis. Close to 600 or 500 of them are from our own community. I said when the last group was here, I think this presents an opportunity for sports tourism in this area. This sport is, although I'm not familiar with it, the facts don't lie. It's growing in leaps and bounds. The fact that we have young people here that are interested in it, it provides, I think, an opportunity for us to create a recreational experience that goes across many different age groups. And I'm hopeful that staff has heard us when we've discussed it with the last pickleball group and with this pickleball group, that there needs to be something in the budget that vigorously addresses the need for pickleball facilities in this area. So I look forward to seeing what the numbers are. I think that you and your sister group have done a great job in presenting the need to us, and this is an opportunity, and thank you for presenting us with an opportunity.
Any further comments or questions? Thank you very much. I kind of think that pickleball is going to be on the front pages for quite a while. Thank you. And thanks for the guys in the back for coming. Okay, we have two pieces of correspondence on the agenda tonight, Council. The first one is the Fire Prevention Officers Association of BC, a request for support by ad purchase.
Your Worship.
And I need a mover and a second.
Sorry, I interject. We have a vote still for the motion put forward by Councillor Salter and seconded. No, we have not voted.
I apologize. I thought we did. It was such a good motion.
It's a great motion. We just
we have a mover and a seconder?
We have not voted.
All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was automatic that it was carried through. Don't mind me. Did we or didn't we? No? I was too eager. That's your fault. Okay. We have two pieces of correspondence on the agenda tonight, Council. The first one is the Fire Prevention Officers Association of BC, a request for support by ad purchase, and the recommendation, I need a mover and a seconder. First of all, for the recommendations, Councillor Burden and Councillor Salter will be referring that to the 2018 budget deliberations. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. The next one is to be received correspondence that we received from the Regional Wood Stove Exchange Program and Burnett's Smart Outreach Campaign. This is simply to receive for information. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Beale. Any comments? All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. You're already there. So we're going to have a presentation on the emergency program update. Mr. Aaron Dawson, our emergency officer, would you please give us the background on this issue regarding the emergency program update?
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. Before I get started, I'd like to share with you two of our partners that are with us tonight. Rob Damon from the town of Qualicum Beach. He's also wearing an emo shirt as I do. He's the emergency coordinator there, a member of Emergency Management Oceanside. And Chris James is with him. Chris James sitting beside him wearing the BC ambulance uniform. Chris is our ESS/ECT volunteer coordinator. He looks after and supports, mentors all of our volunteers. And he also, as you can see, works part-time for the ambulance service. Just got off a shift. And
welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for all you do. I've met you before with the fire. Great job.
So, And I thought it was important for you to see a bit more range of what our program really is as Emergency Management Oceanside. It's not just me. It's just not just a few volunteers. It's a large group of people. Also who are not here tonight are Melissa Tomlinson and John Wilson from the Regional District of Nanaimo. They round out Emergency Management Oceanside. So I wanted to just quickly go through everything that we've gone through this year, and you can see from the topics list that's there, we've had a busy year. It's been an unusual year, and obviously, as you all know from all the wildfires and everything else that's happened locally and abroad, yes, it's been an unusual year. We started out in February. We started out in Qualicum Beach. And again, that's the range of Emergency Management Oceanside. We assisted the Qualicum Beach Fire Department for an apartment building that a washing machine decided to not stop filling when it was supposed to on the top floor of the apartment building, and it flooded down all through the electrical system of the building. So in order to allow the fire department to keep focusing on what they needed to do to make the building safe, Chris and the volunteer team went in with Rob as the lead and took care of all of the volunteers, as you can see there. So on that night, we had 16 volunteers. Just at, we started a call-out process, and 16 of them showed up. And within, what would you say, a couple of hours? Within a couple of hours, they'd all been fed, they'd all been looked after, they'd all been referred to other family members or to hotel accommodation for the night. So it started to show us that what we're trying to achieve here by working together is working. On the other side, so the first was an ESS example. On the other side, for the emergency communications team, we had exercise sweeper in May, at the beginning of May. The province is really good at providing emergency support or emergency social services. They have a really good program. They offer lots of guidance and support, funding. They offer nothing on the communication side. And we have tried for years to get that to change. So as the Mid-Island Emergency Coordinators and Managers, all the emergency programs on the island, we got together and we started to do this on our own. One of the things we decided that we hadn't done was we know all the frequencies, we know how to contact Victoria if we needed to, but we'd never practiced it. That's what Exercise Sweeper was. The opportunity to pass information from all the different parts of the island and get it to Victoria where it needs to be so that help can come out. How it worked out was we have the equipment here in Oceanside. We also have the proximity. We became net control. What net control means is we took all of the messages from the smaller communities and we forwarded them on to Victoria. So what was really kind of interesting is we got to practice everything. Canadian Air Force, Canadian Air Force, not Air Force. They played along. They had airplanes up in the sky, and we talked to those airplanes, and they passed messages for us. We dealt with. It got big enough that the Lower Mainland of Vancouver was involved. I think, did it go as far as Chilliwack? Yeah, and it went out to Washington State as well. It kept mushrooming as word got out that we were going to practice this. More and more groups and more people wanted to be involved. And you can see the dedication of our volunteers. You can see that there's one picture where there's snow there, and you can see the other pictures where, the two bottom pictures during Exercise Sweeper, where it was raining, but all those fellows wanted to be out there. They wanted to do their part. So our volunteers really do work hard for us. The next week was Emergency Preparedness Week. So the first full week in May is Emergency Preparedness Week, and that's a great opportunity for us to ride on the advertising dollars of the federal government and the provincial government to get our message out a little easier during that period of time. One of the things we find really successful for us is public outreach. If we can get, as I've explained to council before, if we can get the public organized, if we can be organized, and if the governments above us are organized, we might be successful. So by reaching out, by going to different locations, as you can read there, we were able to get our message out during that week. And you can see the last bullet there. Rob and I were asked to present emergency preparedness information to the Recreation Facilities Association of BC Conference at Tinamara. So we had a busy week. There was one day that you can see missing from that week. That's here. Rob took control of this exercise, and it turned into a really, really worthwhile exercise for us. And you'll see how that builds as I go here. We have a trailer now for ESS. It's full of material so that we can pop up a reception center anywhere we need to do that. So if a building isn't available, we can pull out the tents, the tables, the chairs, everything we need, and we can do all the things we need to do for people to support them. Our volunteers said they wanted to practice that. Rob had the ability to talk to Eagle Crest, the neighborhood. They were willing to be participants in it. We had the opportunity to talk to them as a neighborhood program, give them some more education, tell them what's out there to serve them, and then, we had the opportunity as well to run those people through, as evacuees so that they would understand what it was really like if that was a real event for them. So it covered everything all in one event. It was very successful. And from that, the volunteers thought it was good enough they wanted to do more of them. Carrying forward, our third annual expo this year was down at the Curling Club. You can see from the slide we had about 31 exhibitors and about 500 visitors from the public. The idea of the expo is to bring first responders, suppliers, what else would you categorize? Utility companies, you name it. We had them all under one roof, and we asked them to bring something that relates to emergency management. For instance, Terrason Gas brings their gas meter in and teaches people how to turn it on and off. And that's an important thing. And that's actually every year. It's a very popular display. We're very fortunate that we've hit the right mix and we're getting the right response from both the public and exhibitors. For instance, this year, BC Hydro didn't bring local people. They sent their marketing team from Vancouver to us with their tents and their displays. And they were very popular because there was a lot of flash and a lot of professionalism to what they did. So we're very fortunate and we're very happy that we're bringing in more and more companies that want to be able to pass on this information to the public. They think it's a great idea. Building off what we had learned in Eagle Crest during the Bald Eagle exercise, we decided we would look at the different... Eagle Crest was an exercise dealing with a slide event. So looking for a different event, we looked at a wildfire for the Bowser exercise and people being evacuated for that. Again, we were fortunate to find a neighborhood that was willing. People came out across from the Legion. There's a shopping center in Bowser. We set up. The volunteers put everything together, and we ran the volunteers through some different scenarios. And this time we tried even harder to give them scenarios that would test them a little bit more, to build their confidence, to build their abilities and their knowledge. So they're looking for more. They're working harder. They're trying really hard for us. They're learning really well. That was on July the 4th. 2 nights later, Oceanside Terrace happened. So unbeknownst to us, it was one of the best investments we ever made. During that night, subsequent nights, and during, I think, the debrief as well, Chris, many of our volunteers said, you know what, we are so happy that we had those 2 opportunities to practice, because they really did shine on the night of the Ocean Terrace apartment fire. So what have I got here? 22 volunteers came out that night to help 43 people evacuated from that building. They did that in about 3 hours. Everyone was processed into whatever accommodation fit them, looked after all their pets. Everything went really smoothly, and that's a real testament to Chris with his leadership and to the volunteers for their pure desire to do this. So again, we had no idea how this year was going to work out. And we went from an apartment fire to dealing with wildfires. And we all know about the wildfires all across the province. And we know that about 60,000 people were affected by the wildfires, and they were sent to either Prince George or Kamloops to start. And that obviously would overwhelm any community, that many people being moved. So as you probably also know, a lot of those people were sent down to the Lower Mainland, and they either landed in Chilliwack or they landed in Aldergrove. And from there, they were processed and told that, hey, you can go, if you've got family somewhere, please go there, and we'll support you there. So in the Oceanside area, basically over the entire time the forests were on fire, we were assisting people that were coming, including some of the relatives of our own staff. So for that, we saw 15 families and 43 people. And we were, through the province, were able to provide them with what's called billeting money. So if you took in a family member from the Caribou, you were given $30 a day from the province and $22.50 a day for groceries. So we spent, as you can see there, over 90 hours of staff and volunteer time to support that effort. And then in addition to that, our program has become really successful. Our program is starting to fill out the way we hoped it would, and we're starting to receive credit from the province, and we are near the top of their list for programs that they turn to when they need help. We have enough people as emergency coordinators in emergency management Oceanside that we could afford to have Rob go for 17 days. Rob was you were at the regional district, the Caribou Regional District? Caribou Regional District in Williams Lake for 17 days. And Chris went to the PREOC, the Provincial Regional Emergency Operations Center in Kamloops, for 7 days. You can see a picture of Chris with the Premier there. The province phoned me one day just before Chris deployed and said, you know what, we would really like it if Chris could come and sit in this chair for a week, because we know that the job will be done right. So obviously we're really happy with that, and we're really happy to send Chris up there. We didn't know that the Premier was going to speak with him. The Premier spent about a half an hour with Chris learning about ESS and what we do. So that's another it's another mark on the wall for us that we think we're in the right direction with our program. We had 4 volunteers that actually deployed to Kamloops and 100 Mile House. We had 2 that were ready to be deployed, but the province changed their mind. We don't know what happened, but all of a sudden they had all their travel orders, and then everything stopped. So, and as you can see on the last bullet there were 91 days of service provided from us to the wildfires. When we started about 3 or 4 years ago to try and work with the town of Qualicum Beach and with the regional district of Nanaimo, we did it because we thought it was the right thing to do. It created capacity. It created some options for us. Some of us can actually go home on a Friday night and have a beer once in a while because you don't have to be on call 24/7 because there's enough of us now. We also knew that not just because as coordinators there was enough of us, as staffs between the 3 local governments, now we're starting to get to the point where we're working on a training program and we can have trained people to run an EOC 24/7. We're getting to that point. Things are developing along. We thought that's the right idea, and what the wildfires taught us from having Rob and Chris deployed is that we're definitely moving in the right direction. Rob came back with a story about how 2 local governments in the Caribou were doing their own thing and they weren't talking to each other. Well, that's why some of the problems happened up there, is because they weren't talking to each other. So it just helped us understand that we're moving in the right direction, and we're really happy about that. And by having enough volunteers, we were able to send out volunteers out to help, and we still had volunteers to help people coming in. So we can never have enough volunteers. So that's identified for us, moved up in our thoughts, the idea of having a recruitment and a retention plan for volunteers. In amongst all of that, you can see the bottom 2 bullets. We had level 1 responses. What we refer to a level 1 response is just somebody's house fire. It's not just somebody's house fire, it's the biggest thing that ever happens to them, right? we were able to handle those. They were no problem at all because we still had the capacity to do that. We had the two house fires in Coombs and a Bowser house fire, in amongst everything else. So we've had a really busy year, but we're really happy to say that so far we've done it, but we have to keep working.
Thanks very much. Questions for Mr. Dawson? Councillor Powell?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. I remember sitting in this very room how many years ago talking about ESS, and it was haphazard. Nobody knew what everybody's job was. We all sort of showed up. We looked at one another hoping that they knew. And I have to say that I'm very happy that you are taking on that role full time. I'm extremely impressed about the work that you've done during this year and the commitment for yourself and the volunteers. Like, we couldn't have done it without you. If this would have happened 4 years ago, that apartment fire, it would have been in a pickle. And so you've come leaps and bounds in the short amount of time you've been full-time there. And I want to thank you for that because I feel a lot safer in this community. Thank you.
Any other further
and
questions?
That's partly because of them behind me.
Councillor Beal, go ahead.
Yes, I too would just like to say hats off, and I know I had the opportunity to meet, I think it was Rob, at the center, at the emergency center after that fire, and who explained how it all operated, and took it upon himself as well to finally take those cats home as well so that everybody could get some sleep. And I know that it was just round the clock for you guys, and what a great team, everybody just working together and spelling everyone off, and it just seemed, and everything, any residents that I spoke to from that fire just had nothing but great things to say about the help you offered and how smoothly it went. So well done.
I attended last summer along with Councillor Oates, I believe. I don't know if anybody else was there, but we had a barbecue for the volunteers. Your volunteers are awesome. Were you there? And the volunteers are, it's going back to the beach fest and everything else. Without volunteers, we're hooped. So I think that everybody agrees that volunteers are a big part of this. When are you going to get some drones?
Oh.
That's all I care about. When are we going to get drones with cameras? Right? No answer? Okay. I'll ask that question again in 6 months' time.
Yeah, right.
Thank you very, very much for your presentation. Very thorough, very comprehensive. Thank you. Okay, our next presentation is on upland water storage. It's an item we referred back in August 21st. I don't need a mover and a seconder. It's back from referral. I want to say that I've asked Mr. Squire to be as detailed and as thorough as possible. This is something that's come up before, and we don't always have time to talk to staff. So I wanted Mr. Squire to be as thorough and as detailed as possible. So, Mr. Squire, would you please give us the scoop on the upland water storage motion that was made on August the 21st?
Yes, certainly, Your Worship. But first, if I may refer back to the question period when the online questions were asked, if I may refer to it quickly. So for the actual reports, the agenda can be found under the ERW's minutes under May 3rd of this year. All the financial report can be seen here. Scrolling down, the actual revenue from the grant from 2012 to 2014 for the ASR are shown on these three numbers here, and the actual expenditures are below. The very final column under Aquifer Storage and Recovery is the expenditures for each year. The actual reports themselves can be shown in 2014 from Dennis Lowe on Technical Report number 1 and number 2. There was a peer review done by GIS Water Solutions out of Oregon and also Associated Engineering. Okay, so on with the report. I hope. With any plan, it always starts with a vision or mission statement. This mission statement, you'll probably recognize this. It's originally adopted by the Aerosmith Water Service. The Englishman Water Service, an environmentally sensitive use of water to improve fish habitat and domestic water supply. So you'll see through my presentation, I'm always constantly referring to the fish and the river, as drinking water is our public's natural resource and ensures our best security for the future. Along lines with that, the city's vision statement, we aspire to be the city of choice for ourselves and the future generations, in a clean, safe, friendly, economically viable, and sustainable environment. That fits under the strategic plan to maintain and enhance the quality of life. And again, to successfully accomplish these visions requires careful stewardship and planning on both surface water and groundwater resources, upon which the ERWS, which is a joint venture between the RDN and ourselves. With that, you have the vision and mission statements. To fulfill those, you have your objectives. The prime objectives of this project has been to make it publicly acceptable, affordable, low impact, blends into the environment, simple to operate, robust and sustainable, and engage the public and enable public education throughout the process and also when it is complete. The actions to achieve those objectives, we need to improve our domestic water supply and distribution systems, meet current standards and regulations, provide supply for future generation, be economically viable as a phased approach, and also, again, improve the fish habitat. One of the confusions, and we've really tried to work hard with media releases of late coming up, we know our current river intake, it's been aging. It's over 40 years old. We've had tremendous problems with it in the last 5-8 years. Actually, since I've been here with the city, we've always had problems trying to withdraw water from the Englishman River, and it's a fairly complex system and not very easy to operate. It requires significant in-stream work all the time. We're constantly going into the river and scarifying that. When we do that, we actually have to get notification to the provincial and federal fisheries agencies. We have to have a full-time environmental monitor being there on site, because as you can see, we've had machines in there, literally in the river. We've had divers in the river, and on a bi-weekly basis, we're actually scarifying it with a hydrant hose and stirring up the gravels in order for us to get water to supply. So it's not the most efficient system. It's what we have right now, and obviously we're building a completely different system, which I'll show you in the future slides. But and it's not able to run during a clay bank if we have a collapse of the clay bank, which happened several years ago. In order to manage our water during those really critical peak times during the summer, we actually have to rely on a water management tool as watering restrictions. And that's really helped us, and I'll try to demonstrate how that's really helped us. As mentioned, the current intake is under capacity and has been for several years now. If you take a trend This is a trend on the upper line here of our peak days during the summer. That's during like July, August, when we have an influx of the visiting population, plus a lot of irrigation going on in the city, and plus our existing population using that water. We designed for that peak maximum day. And if you plot those out, we actually needed to have the new intake over several years ago. We're in a water deficit right now. And we've been managing to actually, with all the problems in the existing intake, we've been managing to actually supply the city with water. One thing interesting with the graph, if you can see where my mouse is, unfortunately it's on the other screen. When we introduced the tiered billing system, where the users actually pay for more water for the more they use, it actually significantly dropped that peak day flow. So you can see that starting in 2011. But if you project up higher, obviously we've been in a deficit for over several years. So how do we plan for water? And it's fairly elementary. We look at what the current demands are. When you design it, you design for the worst case scenario, which is a peak day. But you got to look at the trends. You need to look at the growth projections. Another misconception is we build it, they will come. No, we follow the official community plan and the regional growth strategies of the region. And we look at what they envision for the future, and we build the infrastructure for it accordingly. We need to look at the current yield versus what's required and do it in a phased approach. We don't want to overbuild right now and have it being built for the good next 40 years, but there is components of the actual project that need to be built right now, and I'll show that to you. And then what I talked about is demand management. It plays a fairly significant role where it avoids overbuilding and referring those major capital expenditures and deferring that to the future. And then obviously we rely on very sound technical data and applied science. So if you look at the residential demands, for the national average, looking just residential only, Parksville is typically 70% of the flows or our demand is residential. The national average for Canada is 274 litres per capita per day. For British Columbia, it's a little bit more. It's 353 litres per capita per day. The Parksville average in the early 2000s was 375, so over both of those. In the last 5 years, we're now down to 319. So that shows you what demand management is doing for us. And the best practices is what we've implemented is we have bulk meters. We have bulk meters of our supply, and all our residential and commercial is meters. So we're fully metered. So we are accountable for every drop of water, and we have a tiered billing rate. Again, the more you use, the more you pay. And then we have staged watering restrictions. So the 4 stages have actually tremendously helped out. We also went out to the public throughout the process, and we questioned, do you want to have reduced water? Are you committed to reducing water? And 93% in favor were in favor of reducing water. And it's very similar to the RDN Zero Waste Initiative. Zero waste, I think, was laughed at the beginning, but if you look at it now or 10 years ago, looking at everything recycling, it's gone. It's incredible what the regional district has done on the recycling end. It's the very same account when you're looking at water. The water is our natural resource, and everybody needs to use water wisely. With demand management on the city's behalf, what we've looked at for our irrigation efforts, we have a centralized control system that monitors the weather. If it rains, we have rain shutoffs. It also monitors the humidity. So it monitors efficiently the irrigation, and we've also changed out our irrigation heads so they're using less water, but it's more effective. This year was a very dry summer. and we managed to reduce the actual consumption just for the city's irrigation, and it's down to just over 22 million U.S. gallons this year, which is down from 24.7 million of last year. And this, again, was a drier year, less precipitation than last year. Another initiative we've been doing is using a wetting agent on our playing fields, on our 3 main playing fields at Springwood and the community park. And this has helped reduce the amount of irrigation on those playing fields by 2.8 million U.S. gallons just by using that wetting agent. And it also fertilizes it. What it does, this wetting agent, when you apply it, it reduces the capillary action on the actual grass and allows the water to absorb into the soil more efficiently and throughout the actual grass. So the grass gets it quicker rather than evaporating. So in means of just simply applying this product has saved us 2.8 million U.S. gallons. So that's good drought, good demand management. What we ended up in 2015 is we had a situation again with the river intake. We could not get a second pump going. So this graph just shows our typical annual water consumption in red, showing it. But what happened in 2015 is we had a very dry May and June. We actually saw the flows that we typically see in August and June, or pardon me, July and August, was happening in May and June. And coming into it, we couldn't see us forecasting for the next 2 months just running on one pump. So level 3, when we went to level 3, we saw a little bit of a plateau in the actual peak. And then when we went to level 4, within a day, we saw an immediate 30% reduction. This was an emergency situation that we had to have in order to convey water, because we were actually getting into our fire storage for in the reservoirs. And obviously we don't want to be in that situation, being in the summer months in a dry period. So with growth projections, like I mentioned before, we look at the official community plan and we look at the regional growth strategy. The official community plan envisions, given the 2011 census data, a 30% increase in the population for the next 20 years. And the water supply plan meets the visions of the OCP and the RGS. Just on a basic, what we do with the population data, we get this from the census information, and then we have unfactored demands. The unfactored demands are those peak days during the summertime when we have the visiting population here, and it's the worst case scenario. We take that forward. Our peak day was in 2009, prior to us having the tiered water rate billing and our water conservation levels. So it essentially was getting out of control. So this is assuming no demand management. And then what we do is we factor those demands. We add for Parksville, we times it by 1.25, and for Nanoose, respectively, 1.15. And this is to account for uncertainties in the system, such as climate change, water use changes, growth projections, and the type of system. Because we have a very mechanical system, there could be pump failures. So we're assuming one of the pumps is off and that we're in a severe drought. So that's why you apply these factors. Again, you're taking a worst case scenario and then factoring by 1.25. And then with our groundwater, we assume that we're going to lose our groundwater, and we'll have 70% of the existing capacity 20 years from now. That's assuming no net growth with the water, groundwater. So that ends up, you times your factor demands by your future population, and you get a required surface water supply. For the next 20 years, you're looking at 24 million liters per day, based on your worst case scenarios of a peak day and a factored demand. So just to give you a quick history or rundown, going back to 1972, this is nothing new. The region has always been looking at future water supplies and what areas that we should look in. The first one was started in 1972. They looked at Cameron Lake. The Englishman River was also considered, and also the Nanaimo Lake South Fork reservoirs were considered as well. Cameron Lake was ruled out by the province because the province wanted us to look at a regional approach and the creation of a joint venture partnership towards the Englishman River as a sole source of water supply for the region as a win-win for both public domestic potable water supplies and fisheries enhancements. In the early 80s, the Englishman River was actually one of the most endangered rivers within BC, and the province knew it and tried to figure out a way to actually enhance it. They knew we were looking at plans for water supply, so that's what I mean by a win-win. And at that time, the city of Nanaimo opted out. It was more feasible for them to develop their own water supply system. Going into 1988, the Chatwin Engineering, they looked at the Englishman River quite extensively. They looked at 6 different sites. I won't go through all those sites right now, but their review consisted of forestry considerations, land costs, geotechnical, hydrologic, and environmental considerations. And then in 1992, that report was reviewed by Coors and Associates, Reed Crowther Partners, and then concluded the dam on the Arrowsmith Lake was identified as one of the most economical and environmentally attractive options of all 6 identified in the Chatwin report. Moving on, I mentioned the province was engaged in this. They also did their own water allocation plan. All the water was used up in the Englishman River as far as allocating it for public use. The only way you could extract any more water was to actually impound water, store water, by completing a reservoir. That study concluded and identified the Arrowsmith Lake as one of the most economically environmental attractive sites for water storage impoundment. So that moved the actual project forward, and that's where the AWS was born in 1996. Water license was submitted based on the intake being upstream to where it is currently planned right now, and conditional water license was issued in March 1997. And the conditional water license corresponding provisional operating rule were issued based on the premise of utilizing the existing City of Parksville intake in the interim until such time the future proposed water intake was determined and constructed. So this was a phased approach. Because what happened in the, I believe it was 1995, there was a referendum put forward by Parksville to build the dam and the intake at once. That referendum failed, and the city only had enough money just to build the dam. So it was a phased approach, and that's why we were left with the existing intake. So the dam was constructed between 1998 and 1999. It was commissioned in 2001. It has a total storage of 9 million cubic meters, and it typically operates between May and October. So it's actually withdrawing water out of the reservoir and conveying it down to the Englishman River. It fills up during the winter when we have more precipitation. The location is about 28 kilometers upstream on the Englishman River, and it's just over the Arrington foothills, just within the Arrowsmith watershed. It has a drainage area of approximately 5 kilometers squared. We own the area, but the Island Timberland still has the rights to log it. They would not give that away, obviously, in perpetuity. They want those forestry revenues. The Englishman River drainage basin comprises about 324 square kilometers. So in total, like I mentioned, it's 9 million cubic meters of storage for water. Half of that water is essentially reserved for fish. The other half is for human consumption. Going into fisheries flow targets, there was a lot of consultation back in the early 90s and the last 6 years about what is actually required for fish. This is the most efficient means of getting water from the Arrowsmith Dam, is using the Englishman River as a conduit to convey water. The fish actually get the benefit of that actual additional water down the Englishman River, the wetted perimeter, and we get the benefit of that withdrawal. The critical rearing flow was identified by DFO in a 1 in 80 year occurrence as 0.7 cubic meters a second, and the preferred rearing flow is 1.13 cubic meters a second. The province gave us the provisional operating rule based on maintaining 1.6, which is a value that is greater than the rearing flow and our future water supply. This is from the Chatwin report of 1988, some of the flows that were released in the Englishman River in 1985. And you can see the yellow line here represents flow from June till October, but in the critical months of August and September, you have flows in the Englishman River that are well below the critical rearing period of 0.7 and far below the preferred rearing period of 1.13. There were times, again, it was one of the most dangerous rivers. You could actually walk across without getting your feet wet in certain sections of the Englishman River. So just in summary of the provision operating rule, we have our existing intake that is actually downstream of that flow gauge. So it's downstream of the 1.6. So it includes the actual fisheries conservation flow plus our extraction. Now, again, that number is greater than the in-stream fish flow maintenance plus the future maximum water withdrawal. So that is the future, that peak on peak, looking out 20 to 40 years. The in-stream maintenance flow is 1.13, and our future maximum monthly water withdrawal of 0.34 cubic meters a second. Now, if you take the intake and move it upstream of the gauge, the new provisional rule should be around 1.2 cubic meters a second in future. And that is based on the intake being upstream and the typical design constraints of the dam having a supplying water down the river in a 1 in 15 year drought. This is a graph, again, of the critical time between July and October of the Englishman River. In orange line represents the flow in the river prior to the dam being constructed, and you can see within August to September, the flows were far less than the actual critical rearing period. And after the dam construction shows the green line of the flows in the Englishman River from a period of 10 years between 2000 and 2010, farly exceeding or meeting the 1.6 provisional operating rule. So the dam has done a tremendous benefit of augmenting those additional flows when required during those critical times in the summer for both fish and consumption. Hard to see on this, but again, it's more monthly average discharge volumes of the Englishman River from 1913 when they originally started keeping record to 2010. Prior to the dam construction is in white, and in red you see values that are below 1 cubic meter per second, which is below that rearing requirement that DFO requires us to have. You can see a lot of red prior to the dam. After the dam construction, shown in green, we have no values in red, and in blue the values are greater or equal to 1.6 cubic meters a second. For the fisheries benefits, unfortunately you can't see, but starting after the dam in 1999, these are actual DFO salmon escapement counts, so salmon counts in the river between 1953 and 2008. There's been additional coho, chinook, and pink salmon counts as a result of the extra water, and we allowed the extra water, which has allowed the creation of 2 rearing side channels, fish hatcheries. They were created knowing that we built the dam. The hatcheries were created after the fact, so it enhanced the actual the springs. The pinks come in first into the river. They're already spawned right now, and now the Chinooks are coming in this time of year, and the cohos will come right after the Chinook. There was a lot of work done between 2000 and 2005 with Coors and Associates took into account a triple bottom line approach for weighing environmental, financial risk, and social factors, and therefore further determined that the best location for the intake would be downstream of the originally proposed intake, which was at the confluence of the Englishman River and the South Englishman River. In 2009, the AWS retained associated engineering through a quality-based selection process to further develop the capital plan based on a downstream option. And the primary objectives of the study were twofold. The first was to determine the site and develop a concept for new water intake, the water treatment plant on the Englishman River. And the second and equally important objective was to determine how the surface water and groundwater resources can be best managed throughout the region. In 2011, CH2M Hill was retained to prepare a preliminary design and detailed design of the future intake, water treatment plant, and transmission mains. And every time we went through a different engineer, they reviewed the previous studies and made recommendations based on that. So with the project, the scope obviously is to build the new intake, the pump station, the water treatment plant, and transmission to Topbridge Reservoir. It's approximately about 24% complete in various components. It's been a very busy last 5 months. It's currently on time and on budget, and we've had over 25 change orders to that project. So a change order is a contract, unexpected, just things you need to actually get as part of the contract to make it the infrastructure work. We've been very focused on meeting those critical milestones. There's certain components of the project, like the intake and the crossing, that we had to work within the fisheries window, and that's typically between July and September. With the new intake, it required full-time monitoring, environmental monitoring. They actually had to set up the silt fence first, and they actually shock any fish, including all the crayfish, anything within that river, and take that out and make that area safe. That was one of the main requirements through our permitting. And then you put in the cofferdam. Up here you see the cofferdam along the river, so the river can actually flow freely, and then you actually build the intake in behind that. With this type of intake, you'll notice it's a side inlet channel, so there's no infrastructure in the river. Our current intake has infrastructure in the river that we need to maintain continuously. This, we have stainless steel screens that actually allow the water to come in, but don't impinge any fish, and they meet the DFO requirements. In behind the screens, you can see on the very bottom right, you have actual compressed air in behind the screens that blow off any debris. So rather than being in the river, scarifying the river all the time, we actually have water, or the screens just being cleaned by air and not affecting the actual riverbed itself. There was, after the fact, the intake was constructed, then there was further habitat mitigation along and in-stream work for steelhead parr and salmon rearing and spawning. And within days of actually removing all the cofferdam and barriers, we had fish. The pinks are in there. It's hard to see because they're camouflaged very well. They're spawning right away in the gravels. Actually, the day we took out the cofferdam, I was sitting there with the environmental monitor, and the springs were coming right by, absolutely oblivious to an excavator that was working right beside us in behind the cofferdam. So it worked quite well, and we're happy to be complete and out of that fisheries window. This is what it looks like in cross-section. There's the intake, so when the river flows, you actually get water in the concrete intake, and then it goes through a series of 2 pipes, and then it's pumped up. These are called vertical pump cans, and I'll show you what they look like. And then you've got your pump station above your high water mark, so it's above the actual 200-year floodplain. and all your electrical and mechanical equipment is safe and above that. This can be submerged. It's concrete. There's over 150 cubic meters of concrete in there, and it's fully reinforced. This component is actually built for the future build-out, so it is oversized because we only want to be in that river once. In the whole lifespan of that infrastructure was 80 to 100 years. So again, like I mentioned, it's sized to meet the future OCP build-out projections, and it also has redundancies built in it. We have 2 pipes in case we need to work on one pipe. We can continue to operate. And these are the vertical pump cans. Right now, we'll only install one out of the one pump, and then this other pump can is for future. Same with these ones. If we have to do work on this pipe or this part of the gallery, we can actually still pump with one pump here. And then as we grow, we'll just add in another pump into the actual pump can as required. For the water treatment plant, again, we're looking at a phased, as we grow, we can phase in the treatment cartridges. We've committed to the membrane technology, so as we grow, we just bring in other trains of that membrane. But certain components, the pipe leading up to the water treatment plant, is sized for the future. And as we grow our building, and I'll show you pictures of the building, we'll just add on to the south and add more ultraviolet disinfection components to it. So again, components of the water treatment plant are sized to meet the future OCP build-out projections, and we have an additional underground clear well of storage of 220,000 U.S. gallons underground. So it's essentially what it holds water and creates a balance. So all that treated water is held underneath in a storage tank and then can be pumped out. Looking up, this is the pump chamber. Again, we have, there's actually 4 of these. You can see them in the bottom picture here. There'll be 4 pumps for the ultimate development, but right now we'll only have 2 pumps. And as we grow, we'll just add on another pump as required. So that's the phased approach. With contract 1, there's also the transmission main to Topbridge Park. So that water conveys to Topbridge Park, that conveys to the Craig Bay area and also Nanoose. That pipeline is built to the future build-out projections, and it has an additional capacity of 32,000 U.S. gallons. Just showing the E&N crossing. They have pipe sleeves there, and we're using HDPE pipe, high-density polyethylene pipe, so it requires no joints. So actually, each joint, you can see the device below. It's a fusing device. Basically, it's just a great big hot iron. You can see the disc here, and they fuse the 2 pieces of pipe together with a little bit of pressure, and it's fully welded and strong, one uniform piece of pipe from start to finish. We also used a common trench. You can see 2 water mains there. One water main's coming up from the river, untreated water, and the treated water is going back down to the river, which splits into 2, one going to Topbridge and the other going to Springwood Reservoir. So with the transmission main, it's about 70% complete. All the pipe is in place. And over top of it, we'll have an access through Topbridge Park that will be a multi-purpose trail access that will allow bikes right now. The only trails we have are extreme mountain bikes, and then we do have a trail beside the river, but it's actually stairs. So a family of young kids can ride here at easy gradients, and also provides us access if there's an emergency, something we need to get at to. And for instance, we've added 10 additional fire hydrants as a barrier for their urban interface for the park. Now this is a different, separate contract. This is for the transmission main from Springwood Reservoir that connects to the water treatment plant and goes underneath the Englishman River. It has an additional capacity of storage of 320,000 U.S. gallons, And we've also added 9 additional fire hydrants added for urban interface fire protection. And again, this pipe is sized to meet the future OCP projections. Now, this was a crossing that is complete. Again, this was Fisheries Window. These pictures showing the crossing within the Englishman River. In white in the very bottom here, that's actually a white membrane we put in the river and allowed the water to flow in the river, and while we worked behind the berm in a safe manner. If we actually had to dewater the river, but if we didn't put that membrane, we actually would have dewatered the whole river because it's very porous and gravel. So it was took us a while to get there. Conventional construction without the river environmentally, you're looking at 6 days. It took a lot longer, obviously, because we had to be very conscientious of the environment. It took over a month and a half to actually complete this project. So you actually do one part of it at a time. This second picture shows the pipe coming down. It's actually in a casing. So we built a pipe within a pipe and 2/3 of the way across the river, and then we backfilled that pipe and turned over and did the same thing on the other river and excavated out and actually pulled the pipe through the pipe and then landed it on the other side just to make it more efficient. Otherwise, we would have actually had to have some weld or some flange in the middle of the river, which would have created a weakness in the HDPE pipe. This is a continuous HDPE pipe that is further protected. And again, this has required full-time environmental monitoring, ensure if there's any silts in the river that somebody was monitoring the turbidity right around the clock. So there it is in the finished product. We had to actually restore the riverbed, reconstructing the existing rock structures and creating additional habitat and complexity. And we still need to complete the bioengineered stability. It's still yet to be installed along the banks. Another part of it was Shelley Creek. Shelley Creek runs dry during times of the year, so we're very fortunate we could get into Shelley Creek, but we still had to adhere to all the DFO requirements and work within that fisheries window. There is 2 existing culverts that were essentially rotted out, and it was a fish barrier. We installed a much larger culvert. It's rock lined, so it's fish friendly, and we also installed new habitat in the means of a pool and a rock riffle downstream and added some complexity into the Shelley Creek area. And then there is the Martindale Springs. We had to be there's certain residents on Martindale that rely on that water. That's actually surface water coming through the bank, and they use that water for their own use. We had to ensure that that water is still conveyed along that same path while still constructing the water main through it. So it was a series of putting a lot of perforated drains, a lot of drain rock, over 18 inches thick of drain rock, perforated drains, geotextile, and geofabric to make sure that that water still conveyed and went through. And so those critical milestones are complete, right adjacent to our active railway. Englishman River, Shelley Creek, and Martindale. The contractor focused on getting those done first, and for the next months until spring, they'll be installing the pipe. So as mentioned, contract 1 is approximately 24% complete to date, and the completion date is the spring of 2019. Contract 2 is about 9% complete. It's on time, and it's due in spring of next year, hopefully for substantial completion. There has been some cost implications. The extra rock encountered in the river, because we couldn't get in and actually survey the rock in the river without knowing, and the side banks. And there's also been a problem globally that has affected us locally here with the Hurricane Harvey. It's called force majeure. What happens is the suppliers that were shut down as part of Hurricane Harvey, they can basically, they supply the resins for that HDPE pipe. And unfortunately, we have about 7,000 feet remaining that's to be supplied. Now there's a supply and demand for that because those factories have now shut down, and now those factories can now charge a premium for that pipe. I don't know what costs that's going to incur in the future, but we're very much aware of it right now. We had a truckload coming last week. Unfortunately, they got in an accident, so we lost that pipe, and all that pipe was damaged significantly, so we can't use that. Yeah, that's just an indication of the suppliers down in Houston. It's an act of God, and it's a legal right that they can claim for that entitlement because they've been encumbered by that natural disaster. So in summary, for our existing water supply, it's very cumbersome to operate right now by two means. We only can convey water in the summertime because we have no filtration. So we're constantly switching water sources, going from the river in the summertime, trying to blend it with groundwater in the summer, and we end up kind of chasing some of the water quality issues by our flushing program because you got two different water bodies mixing with each other seasonally. So it's always a challenge for operators to do that. We have no buffer. We have no redundancy in our water systems. Our pumps run sometimes 24/7s in those peak days, and it's obviously difficult to control and operate based on that. And we only have, our only form of treatment is just chlorine. We pump out of the river and we add chlorine. When we pump out of the river, the bottom is a depiction of the Englishman River, the dams conveying the flows down the river. We pump out of the river, we add chlorine. Once it's gone there, it goes directly into the distribution system. If we ever had E. coli, we wouldn't have any way or means of tracking where that source went to. It's just based on the demand of the distribution system. It's almost bass backwards, unfortunately. And then through pressure, we pressurize the distribution system, and that raises the reservoirs. So we go through the distribution system to the above ground reservoirs, and that's how we get our storage. With the new system, what we'll have is we'll actually get water year-round from the Englishman River. We'll have a blended source of the well supply with the surface water supply at the Springwood Reservoir, and it'll mix there. We'll have dedicated transmission mains after we treat it to the Springwood Reservoir and then to the Topridge Reservoir. So you'll actually have a proper inlet and outlet to the reservoirs, and then from the reservoirs it's gravity to the distribution system. So if anything did happen or manage to get through the water treatment process, you have huge buffers in there from the water treatment in the transmission mains all the way to the reservoir. So you can actually isolate that. If something did happen, you could flush it out. With that, we have additional storage capacities, we have redundancy, we have year-round operations, emergency storage, control, far better control of our supply system, and as mentioned, a dedicated in and out for our reservoirs. So getting back to our objectives, you always look at the results. Being publicly acceptable, we were 80% in favor of public consent. We received over $12 million in federal provincial grants. We looked at reduced cost options, and we looked at phasing the construction. Originally, we're looking at maybe building 24 megaliters, and we reduced that down to 16 megaliters, and we can actually just add that in as required. The intake and water treatment plant, we hope to have it open to public. Most infrastructure, when you're talking with water, we didn't want something with a chain link fence looking at it, especially when it's in a park. You want the people to enjoy it. If it's safe for our employees to go and operate that intake, it's right adjacent to a trail. the public can actually have it like a viewing platform there, and then we can educate that public on what the benefits of the dam do for the Englishman River and the fish. And we continued the habitat enhancement, and we also had, with the public engagement objective, we had numerous community working group meetings. We had 5 community working group meetings, I believe 5 open houses, numerous media releases and presentations. So in summary, improved additional emergency fire protection along the urban interface. We've added 19 additional fire hydrants added on the transmission main. Our drinking water is exceeding the Canadian drinking water guidelines. We've improved the water distribution system and redundancy for emergencies. We have dedicated supply mains now. We will have improved water quality, and we'll have improved turnover within our system and control as well. And we've added additional storage in the Clearwell, in the Topbridge transmission main, and the Springwood transmission main. So the Arrowsmith Lake Reservoir provides substantial additional water supply to the Englishman River during those critical summer months. It is proven to be the most economical environmental means of conveying water for both domestic and water supply, and will continue to provide summer flow augmentation for fisheries and domestic supply well into the future. A review of the Arrowsmith Lake Reservoir supply by Kerwood Lydell and CH2M Hill concluded that the Arrowsmith Lake Reservoir is capable of supplying water for the next 20 years based on those peak demands, that number I showed you of 24 megaliters per day. Again, that is the worst case scenario. And withdrawal of maintaining a minimum conservation flows for drought conditions and within the original design constraints of the Arrowsmith Dam in a 1 in 15-year drought. The review accounted for the climate change, environmental considerations for fisheries, and future growth and demands, which is our regional growth strategy, the RDN, and the OCP. The current peak day demand as of this summer of June 27th, 2017, is 8,300 cubic meters per day, so that's 8.3 megaliters per day that we're taking out of the river. And we were lucky to have 2 pumps running this year, which made the difference. So we only went to stage 3. So the recommendations: the supply from the Arrowsmith Reservoir into the Englishman River is sufficient to meet the needs of the community for the next 20 years based on the current climate predictions and official community plans. Should Council wish to provide rapid development beyond what was envisioned in the official community plan through city boundary extensions or any upzoning, additional water supply would be needed to develop or to be developed to accommodate the additional growth demands. Surface supply, groundwater supply, aquifer storage and recover, and demand management should all be considered if Council wants to change or relook at the OCP. If Council wishes to entertain additional storage for water supply ahead of when is required, then you need to look at the full technical review. This review would consist of something, the provincial and federal fisheries requirements and approvals. You would need to consult with the provincial dam safety requirements, because and doing so, you would need to produce flood inundation mapping and studies. You need to consider environmental mitigation measures. Access requirements and legal right-of-ways would need to be considered. Consultation with landowners to understand if they're willing to sell, and if so, what cost of compensation would be required for loss of forestry timber rights in perpetuity. Should Council wish to look into additional flow required for fisheries purposes, this would be non-consumptive license to offset any additional flow extraction from the Englishman River when required. Recommendation would be to address the ERWS Board and to continue with the study that was brought forward to the Arrowsmith Water Service Board on January 13th, 2011 by the BC Conservation Foundation on impounding Healy and Shelton Lakes. Now, this was just for fisheries flow conservation, and At that time, the Aerosmith board wasn't interested in continuing the study because, again, we don't need that water for over 20 years from now. But if council does wish to provide some additional fisheries, this would be an excellent project to look at. Sorry for the long drawn, but
thank you.
A bit of history.
No, that's what you were asked to do, and you did it. Questions for Mr. Squire from members of council? Councillor Burton.
Thank you very much for an excellent report. I feel a lot better informed than I was. You talked about the reservoirs for fire storage. Can you tell me the volume of?
Yeah, we have 2 above-ground reservoirs. About 70% of the water in those above-ground reservoirs in Springwood and Topbridge reservoirs, you try to have about 70% of that water for fire suppression if there's a major fire. And that's determined by fire underwriters, and I believe it's a 3.5 fire in a commercial area such as the resort area. You have to have at least 3.5 hours of fire flow, and that accounts for what's required in those above ground reservoirs. Each reservoir is approximately 1 million US gallons. So Topbridge Reservoir, in cubic meters, that's about 4,000 cubic meters in Topbridge Reservoir, and in Springwood Reservoir is a slightly larger, I think it's 4,100 cubic meters. Yeah.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just wondering, so at this time, although we're in a water deficit, we're still okay. We can still supply enough water to the city.
Yeah, that's correct. With our existing intake, the straw is too small. So we've used demand management, that being water conservation and tiered billing, to actually help reduce the amount of water, and that has helped us. We've also aggressively gone in more frequently, which costs us more in operating, going into the river, because you have to employ a full-time environmental monitor to be in there. But right now, yes, there's a water deficit in the intake, because right now our existing intake is too small, and that's why we're building a bigger intake.
But at this time, it is at least managing the need. It's okay.
Just 2 years ago, we had to go to level 4 because it was an emergency situation, and not all the public obviously liked it or understood it, but it was necessary to do it because it was impacting our emergency supply in the above ground reservoirs. With the future water system, we won't have that anymore. That situation will be extinct, and we'll have a bigger intake. We'll be able to withdraw the water more efficiently and be able to convey that water to the above ground reservoirs, so we won't get into a deficit for fire suppression storage.
Okay. And so when this goes online and we include Nanoose Bay or a portion of Nanoose Bay, we're going to have 24 million megaliters per day that we can manage at peak demand.
That's correct.
Okay, but currently we're at 8.3 megaliters per day, and we're okay, but we're just okay.
Yeah, so the 8.3 is our current existing demand. So with the new intake and the pumps that we're installing right now, we'll be able to convey for the next 20 years is that 24 megaliters as we grow.
So I'm wondering why we spent at least 1.7 million in aquifer storage exploration if we don't need it.
Well, aquifer storage and recovery was actually looked at quite interesting. The consultant brought it to our attention, and that was actually, we looked at it ahead of what we needed for the water treatment. So the more we could actually store underground, the less water treatment we would need initially. That was the main focus of aquifer storage and recovery. And with water treatment plants, you want them to run continuously, even though the membranes it can turn off and on quite easily, but for water treatment process, you want it to run at a continual basis. So what we on the coast here have a problem with is water demand in the summertime. We have an abundant supply during the winter, but it's very hard for us to convey. Being a very mechanical system, our pumps turn on and need to get that peak demand. We can use water demand to get that peak demand down, but in the winter time, we can actually be treating that water and then putting into the underground aquifer, and in the summertime withdrawing that water and running the plant at the same threshold continuously year-round, and then withdrawing that water that we stored in the wintertime for use in the summer. What that was we were trying to look at was reducing that. So instead of the water treatment plant being 48 megaliters per day, you would have potentially, if ASR was proven to be successful, it could actually reduce that amount significantly. Unfortunately, we ran out of time with ASR, and we had to get on with the project, so that's deferred for 5 years from now.
Well, the reason I ask about aquifer storage is it doesn't look like you think you need it anymore. But you did need it before, so I'm just not.
It was looked at to a ways and means of reducing the water treatment plant size. We didn't have enough time prior to. We had to get on with the project, so we put the ASR on hold. It's actually in the budget in 2011, after 2021, pardon me, to relook at ASR for the future. It did work at K Road, but the yield wasn't enough to actually warrant getting the pipe out to K Road. With ASR, you need to look at it's not an exact science, it's a proven science. So you need to go in and essentially build the well and proof it out. With almost every well, it's you need to do that. But with ASR, you actually need to test it. And that's what the major cost in that. But if it does work, it is quite beneficial, and it has worked successfully throughout North America. The trick is finding the right aquifer. The reason why we looked at K Road was it's in an area that's essentially away from other wells that no one else can tap into it. Right now, there isn't regulation in BC. If I put a well in 10 feet, on my next door neighbor can tap into that, unfortunately.
That's right.
We were looking for regulation, and we've been talking with the ministry about that regulation. It hasn't happened yet, but they're very well aware of ASR. There is a future in BC for it, and they're looking into that, regulating well water extraction. The actual well water extraction regulations just changed within the last year, so there is some ordinance written there.
Yeah, there's a lot of change coming to to water as far as the Water Sustainability Act. There's a lot of change coming down the pipe. And so then my next question then is, the Chatwin study did not look at upland water storage. In fact, I can't find anything that did. So upland water storage has never been studied. There hasn't been a report on it. So, and in addition, the Chatwin study, which was done it was completed in 1986, that indicated that the aquifers in this area were not sufficient to supply the community at any rate. So I'm wondering, as far as, because my motion, I know that, we were speaking to the motion that I put forward, which was, let's look at the possibility of upland water storage. But there hasn't been any study to date on upland water storage.
There's been multiple studies on looking in the Englishman River watershed for impoundment. If it's upland storage, it's water impoundment. The Chatwin study identified 6 different locations for water impoundment, which I guess you could call upland storage, which is in the actual watershed itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did read the 6 points that were in the Chatwin study. None of that was upland water storage, which was the motion. That was the motion. So that was the reason for that, which was we have spent $1.7 million on aquifer water storage. It didn't didn't work out, which is fine. We get that it didn't work out. So for future, when you're talking, what are we going to do in future? You're stating that although we're at 8.3 megaliters per day now, we can go 3 times that amount and supply, portion of the News Bay in a very short period of time here, just because the water treatment plant is done. And so, okay, but that being the case, it's not a stretch to recognize that, as you mentioned, in the summertime, when we have tourism and we have a big draw on water, we've got people using water, hydrating, whatever the extreme use that happens in the summer because we have more people here, plus we're densifying, that we are going to need more water. The river only has X amount. There's 9 million cubic meters in that dam, and that's it. Not a drop more, drop less. And the other piece of that is that when we are supplying the river with what is supposed to be 1.6 cubic meters per second, those numbers are not always at 1.6. Like just last Sunday, they were 1.3. So we have to have 15 degrees Celsius for water to be safe for human consumption and for fish. It has to be. So the temperatures, of course, are going to fluctuate when we're dropping the amount of cubic meters being released from that dam. Whether we have a treatment plant or not, the depth of water in the cup will determine, and the air temperature will determine the amount of temperature in that water. So dropping it to 1.2 cubic meters per second might be work, but that's not going to work for the temperature in the river because nothing's changed. In the topography of the river, nothing's changed. So my thought is, if that's the case and we are held to the 1.6, then we would need storage of some sort somewhere to be able to access it, which is why the motion for upland water storage, so that when we get to that point where we're having to drop from 1.6 or the water temperature is increasing from 15 degrees, we have an option.
Okay, can I ask Councillor Beal to make a comment, and we'll come back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Squire, for the presentation. And I had a few questions, but a number of them were answered in your summary and your wrap-up. But just to clarify, from my understanding, I think of the Arrowsmith Dam, and Arrowsmith Lake is de facto upland storage, is it not? And the river is, in fact, gravity feeding this. I also, and again, you can clarify this for me, but from my understanding, well, I'd just like to make a couple of points, and then if you could confirm or expand on them. One is that with the design of the water treatment plant that we're going with and the distribution lines and that some of those things in fact provide storage capacity that increases what we have now available. But also my understanding is that DFO and the health of the river for the fish would limit the amount of water that one might be, let's say, taking out of the lake, to put elsewhere. But also, if we don't need it for a while, then I'm hearing at the end here that could be something that we need to look at in the future, like additional storage. But for a good 20 years, we actually have increased storage ability. Is that correct? I know that was a bit muddled. My apologies.
No, you're correct on all points on your understanding of upland storage. We have built the Arrowsmith Dam. The full intent of that is to impound that storage and use the Englishman River to convey those flows for both fish and future generations. The 1.6 is a number because we are downstream of the gauge right now. When we move our intake upstream, we've already accounted for the flows that we provided in the Arrowsmith Dam storage to take out. And so now it'll be the new provisional operating rule will be somewhere around 1.2. Does that make sense? Because now you're upstream of the gauge. So putting the 1.6 aside, 1.6 is a number that was just given to us by the province, which is a number that's greater than the fisheries rearing flow that is required by DFO and our future ultimate build-out extraction of, I believe the number was 0.34 cubic meters a second. We have built that storage. I have to, as staff, you employ me to rely on, and I look at technical data and science, the proven science on that, the technical data. And our consultants have all indicated that we have enough supply with the Arrowsmith Dam. It has done a tremendous job for the Englishman River. It's shown that through the data itself, the Englishman River used to be dry in times a year. In the last several years, it would have run dry. The Arrowsmith Dam does its lion's share for the Englishman River and will continue to do so in the future for the next 20 years based on peak volumes. If you want to look at any change, we have to follow the OCP. It's the growth projections. If we're worried about growth, the OCP is what you need to focus on for growth. We just go by what the OCP says and what we're seeing in the trends. I'm looking at demand management as a great tool, very much like recycling, to take those demands down. The more demands we can take down, we can actually extend the life, and we don't have to build as quickly as before. So you're actually deferring those future capital costs, which are very costly. We just went through a whole exercise of trying to really hone down our water treatment plant and get it most financially viable for our existing population right now. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough money in the pot for the development community to fund that. So that's why we have to borrow. A lot of things come into play when you're looking at water, but again, I have to look at the technical data and the science and what our consultants, we engage them to do on all the reports. They've reviewed it, and we're good for 20 years, including climate change.
You have one. Well, I'll give you one more. Councillor Oates.
Thank you. I know that facts are important. So I think that you said that the capacity of the Arrowsmith Dam was 9 million cubic meters. Can you think of any emergency or event that could happen where we would need more than 9 million cubic meters on reserve?
I can't think of any other event.
Thanks.
And then I'm going to go back to Councillor Salter, and then we're going to call the vote. Motion on the floor.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I also just wanted to ask a little bit about the fact that with the new water treatment plant and the intake, we'll be able to draw water out of the river for greater periods of time than we do now. Right now, it can only be in the summertime due to sediment, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, does that have a mitigating effect on perhaps river flows, et cetera, into the summertime? Does that give us a little extra cushion there?
Yeah, it actually does. Having the surface water going year-round, it will allow our aquifers to rest in the shouldering periods. So right now, our aquifers are quite stressed, and that's the reason why we got onto surface water years back. It's always been noted in the Chatwin report, and it's well noted that our aquifers are stressed and declining. That's why the whole region started looking at surface water supply. So by having surface water year-round, we can actually, when less demands like coming up in the next month, we can actually turn our wells off and let the aquifers recharge and rest. If we're constantly pumping them, they're constantly declining. So in the early spring and late fall, by having surface water and abundant surface water and demands are a lot lower, we can essentially just go onto surface water and turn our wells off.
So that does mean, in fact, we will, in fact, be pulling water off in the winter, for instance, which was one of the recommendations from some of the individuals, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct, too. And the nice thing about the Arrowsmith Dam being at the very top end, one thing I forgot to mention in the PowerPoint was it actually has a siphon, so it's glacier water, and the siphon, when we go into the siphon, it actually lowers the temperature in the Englishman River by 2 to 3 degrees when we get into the siphon at that time. So you're drawing water from that glacier-fed water in the very bottom of that stratification of your reservoir. And when we do that, we actually, when we're into the siphon, it actually does a significant benefit for temperature, and fish like it too.
Councillor Beale asked the question I was going to ask. So, Councillor Salter, you made the motion. We're going to end with you, so fire away.
Well, first of all, the siphon works in the winter when there's glacial runoff, not in the summer when there's no runoff. When there's no snowpack, there's no glacial runoff to cool the river down. And that river has been known to reach temperatures of well over 20 degrees Celsius in the summer. So I don't know how that works. But my last question is really simple. Number one, it isn't 9 million cubic meters that we're getting. We're getting 4.5. The other half belongs to DFO, and we don't get to take it. So we get the 4.5, that's it. It doesn't matter what happens. We only get 4.5. And so 4.5, this is 4.5. This is it, 4.5. And I can build this, and I can build this, and I can build this, and this is bigger than that, and that's bigger. But this doesn't change. It's still 4.5. It won't change the amount of water that I have, regardless of what I build down here. It won't change. My water's here. It's gravity fed. Comes out of here. It goes down to there, and that's that. And then it goes off out into we drink it, or it goes off out in the ocean. That's it. Full stop. So I don't like we need something else. I know that we need something else. I think a lot of community members recognize that we just need to look at another storage ability to store water so that we can supply the city. During those months when we're at low, when we're at peak use, and we don't have the water, when there's nothing left for us to take, it's DFO's water. What do we do? What do we do? That's it. So therein lies the reason for the motion. It's just due diligence. That's it. Full stop. It's just due diligence. So hopefully, council will agree to at least look into the cost of the possibility of an upland water storage with an independent person who can take a look.
So I'm going to read the motion with the Councillor Salter made, and I'm just going to read the main motion. I won't go through all the whereases. That the City of Parksville investigate the advantages of upland storage to supply winter water, which will gravity feed in the summer months, with information gathering to include projections for at least 20 years, and report which should come back to council before the election in 2018. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is defeated. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to the next report, which is the consideration of a development permit issuance for exterior building alterations, installation of a drive-through, and associated landscaping at 814 Island Highway West. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background?
For Mayor Worship, for council consideration this evening is consideration of issuance of a development permit. It's a renovation.
Excuse me, Mr. Russell. It's almost 9 o'clock. Do we want to take a 5-minute break? No? Okay. Carry on. Go ahead.
For Mayor Worship, for council consideration is a development permit. It's an exterior renovation to an existing building at Wembley Mall. Council is considering the architectural form and character of the building and the landscaping changes. It involves the addition of a drive-through to facilitate a coffee shop. There's also a second unit which has an undetermined tenant at this time, and the permit is attached for council's consideration of issuance.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was reviewing the proposal and also the site, and I had one concern in that I don't see any indication of any bicycle racks being included, and I would like to request that staff contact the property owner's agent to request the inclusion of bicycle racks on site. I wonder if, I don't know if they need a motion for that or if that could just be a request. I understand that there's a lot of communication with the agent and the planning department.
If I may, Your Worship, I have no problem contacting the proponent. In fact, I actually already have contacted them, and they've indicated they would not have an issue adding a bicycle rack on the site.
Any further questions? If there's no further questions, we have a quorum. I'm going to call the vote. Now we definitely have a quorum. I'm calling the vote. Councillor Salter's coming back, so we'll have a full house. I asked if anybody wanted a 5-minute break. Don't? No? Okay, so on the 3 motions that you have regarding the consideration of a development permit issuance for exterior building alterations, installations of a drive-through and associated landscaping at 814 Allen Highway West. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Okay. Now, this is going to be a little bit different, councillors. I'm not going to ask for a mover and a seconder. I'm going to ask Mr. Russell to give us the background on the issue consideration follow-up report of a development variance permit and development permit to facilitate commercial development of 164 Alberni Highway and 113 Jensen Avenue. And then I'm going to ask if there's any individuals in the audience who wish to speak. So, Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on this issue?
Sure, if I may, Your Worship. This is a follow-up report. Since the September 18, 2017 meeting, the required notification for the development variance permit application has occurred. At this point in time, we have not received any correspondence. This application, if approved, will approve the building on the corner of Alberni Highway, as well as the parking lot on Jensen Avenue West associated with the development. The variances are detailed in the report, and I will pass it over to you to ask for public comment if there's any comment.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak? And if they do, would you please come forward to the microphone, state your name and civic address for the record? Anyone want to speak? No, I'm kidding. Sit down.
Sit down. Sit down.
Oh, okay, I need a mover and a seconder for the motion. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I can ask a couple questions, please. Thank you. I noticed that on the development plans that it is still referred to as the Gateway Development. So I'm going to ask, how different is this development from one that has been put forward in the past? Besides the fact that it only has the 1 story and it doesn't have the residential components.
That's a very tricky question to answer, because we're really talking about 2 different projects on the same property. I think the Gateway reference, my understanding is because it's really sort of the start of the defined downtown area. So that would be from my perspective, the reason why they're probably referring to it as the Gateway. The other project was a larger building. It was 2 stories. It was a more significant building. So that would be my summary of the differences.
Thank you.
Councillor Salter.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say I really like the looks of this this plan, this concept, and I also really like that something's going to happen on that corner now. So I just think let's do it.
You're saying call the vote?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried unanimously.
Oh, you don't want to leave now.
You want to talk about marijuana? No? Okay, we have reports, more reports. Ooh, we have lots of reports. Okay, the first report, Mrs. Kaler, I need a mover and a seconder for the proposed training policy. Councillor Powell, and then do I have a seconder? Councillor Beal. Mrs. Kaler, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the proposed training policy? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the city currently has a number of positions in the operations department that require employees to have a Class 3 driver's license. However, there are some additional employees who, while they're not required to have the license for their current position, they have expressed an interest in obtaining this license to allow them to cover for temporary leaves and to expand their opportunities to move into other positions within the organization in the future. The city has existing policy that supports employees who wish to pursue personal development opportunities, even where those opportunities are not directly related to their current position. It is considered beneficial to the city for us to have additional people with Class 3 license qualifications, and there's also a desire for the policy to be consistently applied to this specific circumstance. The cost of obtaining a Class 3 license varies depending on the specific needs of the individual in terms of their training and also their access to using vehicles for training purposes. A Class 3 license requires a very large vehicle. I think it's a double axle. Perhaps the Director of Operations or so can weigh in. But it's not vehicles that are typically accessible to normal drivers. And so in some cases, you have to actually rent those vehicles to practice. So this proposed policy would allow interested employees to obtain a Class 3 driver's license by paying for half of the fees themselves and then having the city support them for the remaining 50%. The intent of the policy is to further support employees by allowing them to finance these costs through a payroll deduction, which would reduce financial hardship or financial constraints for those interested employees. And recommendations are per the agenda.
Questions for Mrs. Kaler? Councillor Sol.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that. I just really need to know the cost. So I'd like to know, regardless of, that it might be a little more or a little less, I need an amount to be able to agree to. And also, it would make a difference to me that the employee that wants to get that Class 3 wants to get it because they have a plan. So I would like to see maybe you have developed something that is a plan that, Bob, what do you plan on doing for the next 5 years? And, I want to get my Class 3. Then he's written it down, he signed it off. That would make sense to me, but just for me to see it, I think it would be really great to have a Class 3. I'm not sure that I would support that. So I would like to know the numbers, and then I would just like a little more detail around it, but that's all. That's what I would like to see. So right now it's kind of wide open for me.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councillor Salter. So the numbers are, it's about $3,000, give or take. It can be $3,500, and 50% of that cost would be the employee's cost, about $1,500. And we anticipate that there would be 2 or 3 employees per year that would be interested in this option. So around $3,000, maybe $3,500 per year. Yeah, and what we also have is there's 2 things. You mentioned that you would like to see this be part of a career path, and so that is actually stipulated in the current policy and on the form that the person would have to fill out to get approval from their director. And so it's based on the wording we use as an approved career plan that would identify, where the person is in the organization and what position they would like to move into. They also have to commit to stay with the organization for a period of time, or they have to pay back the amount that they were given on a prorated basis. So this would be something they would have to talk to their manager and supervisor about, get approval, complete a form, commit to staying with the organization for that period of time. And that's all in writing with there's a form attached to the current policy. So.
Go ahead.
Thank you. That's good. And then my next question would be the number of people. So, could we cap X amount of dollars per year towards towards a Class 3?
So at the moment, I spoke with the manager of operations, and this is the more typical location where this would come up. And he indicated that there would be 2 to 3 people per year. We do have a lot of staff that already have their Class 3 and come to the city with that. Just based on the people who have spoken with him already and who have applied for temporary coverages, we don't anticipate it being any more than that. But at the staff level, we haven't typically wanted to impose limits just in case there are some individuals who have great potential and who come to their director. We prefer to leave that at the discretion of the director. However, council can certainly provide some additional constraints if it wishes to do so. At the moment, we are finding that I think it's no more than 2 per year. We had a couple of people who actually got their Class 3 license and weren't aware of this policy, and so never asked for reimbursement. And so we're basically letting staff know that if council is supportive of this idea tonight, we would retroactively reimburse from the date of the policy adoption, which was in 2013, and we anticipate that that is 3 people. So there would be that cost for the previous years where someone just wasn't aware that they could have sought this support. And so we haven't seen more than that. Like that would have been for a 3-year period, there was 3 individuals.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. And some of that was what I did have some questions about, because in the report it did indicate that you would anticipate 1 to 2 per year, and I was wondering if it would make some sense to cap that at 2. I certainly know that that's, I've had experience with that in other organizations where, up to so many people could apply for something per year. But understanding that that you want to do that catch up and there would be discussion with the manager and going forward, I gather you don't think that that would be an issue. And I see Mrs. Comas would like to comment on that.
Yes, Your Worship, through to Council. I would recommend against putting a cap on it. The number of people that this would impact is not that great. And because we are in a union environment, once we put a cap on it, then we have to develop criteria for the evaluation of who gets to do it. Do we do it based on seniority? What are the criteria that we would use? So each department has a training budget. And it is at the discretion of that director how that training budget is divided amongst their employees. So if they run out of money in their training budget, then that's a de facto cap right there. And so there are constraints within the system that we have that would limit the number of people we could do this for in any given year.
Thank you. I was just thinking that it would be nice if it's sort of even over time, but understood. And also, can you have I got this correct, that so an employee, I want to support this, I just also want to understand it fully, that an employee could apply for a loan for 50% and have, when that was very clear in the report, thank you, and then the remaining 50% would be reimbursed once the course is complete. Is that the way? Because that's sort of how I understood their wording, but I just wasn't sure about that.
Did you say retroactive to 2013?
Your Worship, if I may. Council adopted a policy in 2013 which provided for 50% of personal development courses to be paid from a departmental training budget. So it appears that we didn't do a very good job in communicating that policy to people, and so they never applied for it. So we have 2 employees who went on their own and got their Class 3 licenses in the last year without recognizing that they had a policy available to them that would assist them with that. And I think in fairness to those 2 employees, given that the policy was adopted by Council on August 7th of 2013, that we should make that available to those 2 employees.
But they just went for this just within the past year?
In the last year.
Okay.
Okay, folks, I'm going to call the vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Oates, your hand went up.
Yeah. So I have more questions now that I've heard somebody answers. But one of the concerns I have with the policy, and it ties into what was just being talked about, those two individuals that went and of their own initiative and got that, if this policy were in place, those two individuals would require the approval of the responsible department director. And for me, coming from in the work that I do, I see an opportunity there for the employer to set somebody up for a future position, because you require department head approval to get the course. So I may be senior in the department, and I may wish to take this course, but absent director's approval, I don't get to do it. And next week, when a posting comes out for a Class 3, I'm denied the opportunity to apply for that because the employer has set the table for somebody else. So I can't support it based on that alone. As to the question was asked about the retroactivity for those other folks. The answer, as I understood it, the retroactivity could be applied to them today based on the existing policy, and whatever decision is made, or that was the answer that was just given anyway, whatever we do here today doesn't impact the ability of the city to reimburse those people retroactively if they believe if they're being paid retroactively because of their their unawareness of the policy at the time. So this here, whatever we do with this doesn't prevent those people from being taken care of, is what I heard, but maybe it's different. This policy, though, however, gives the opportunity for you to be selective and have no regard for seniority, and you're setting the table for the fair-haired child. Son of the boss, brother of the boss, Bob's, Nobs, all that sort of stuff.
Mrs. Comas.
Your Worship, you are correct. The two employees who took it in last year could certainly do that. I'm afraid I'm rather insulted by the idea that a director of this organization or myself would limit anybody's ability to take training based on a fair-haired child policy. That is not something that I have been aware that anybody here has ever done, certainly not in my tenure. And we work very hard to create an even playing field for all our employees. A Class 3 is a basic tenet of any position above a laborer 1 in the organization. We have been trying to recruit laborer 2 positions externally and had made 2 offers to people who got other employment elsewhere, and we lost them within the last month. So the reason that we didn't get internal applicants is because there was no one at a laborer 1 level with a Class 3 license who would be able to apply because they didn't make the qualifications, so they chose not to apply. This policy would enable us that any laborer 1 position who wants to qualify themselves to be able to apply, because under our collective agreement, knowledge, skills, and abilities comes ahead of seniority. Anyone who wishes to take the initiative to improve their skill level and set themselves up to be able to apply for a job would still need to go through the interview process and prove that they had the knowledge, skills, and abilities in addition to seniority to be able to fulfill that, fulfill that position.
Councillor Oates, then I'm going to go to Councillor Powell.
Yeah, I'll go back and I'll review the tape when I go home tonight. Speaking to the point about being offended by what I said, I don't believe I said that anybody in staff here did that. I said the policy, I believe my exact words, the policy as it's written provides the opportunity for that to happen. So I never said staff was doing that. Let me make that 100% clear. What I said is the opportunity exists under this policy, if approved, for a director to arbitrarily decide whether anybody gets the opportunity to do this. You spoke about the collective agreement about abilities and skills and qualifications being the first deciding factor. That further cements my point that this position, that this should not be based on what you're doing is exactly what I said could happen. Not what you're doing. What you could do is exactly what I said could happen, is that you could set the table so that that person there would have more skills, qualifications, and ability because the director of the appropriate department said, yay, you can do the course. But the senior guy didn't do that. So unless we're going to apply a policy where it gets applied to everybody equally, because I believe that's what policy is supposed to mean, I can't support having. I can't support this where we set up the opportunity for what I said could take place, not what was heard that is taking place. What I said could take place. So I don't want to set up staff for an opportunity for someone down the road perhaps to be hired and become a manager that's not here with us today that would be nefarious enough to take advantage of the policy the way it's written, so I can't support it.
Councillor Powell and then Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I disagree with Councillor Oates. When I worked for the government, I applied for and received training in drug and alcohol addictions, and it had nothing to do with seniority. It had to do with my career pathing. It had to do with my work, the work I did for the ministry. Seniority did not come into any kind of role in this until I applied for a job, and then seniority was counted. And it was counted after, if I was tied, seniority was taken into consideration. And so I disagree strongly with Councillor Oates, and I think this is a good policy, and I think it's written well, and I think it's a good way for us to get our employees to buy in, to stay here, and to what do you call it, get promotions. So, no, I agree. What? No, I don't buy it.
Mrs. Comas, how many laborer ones do we have? Approximately.
I honestly don't know, Your Worship. About 5 of them, I guess.
Okay. Councillor Beale and then Councillor Salter.
Okay, thank you, Worship. And the way I understood, and I know it's kind of gone off there, but I will support the policy. But what I was hearing was that if we were concerned about having a cap, that is where we could end up with situations where there's this person can, this person can't, and so on and so forth. And but I don't see that in this policy at all. It does seem to be quite open to those who wish to take advantage of it to go ahead and do that. So I will support it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't disagree with Councillor Oates with his premise. But I know that that there is a grievance process. So if anything that he described were to happen, then that employee would have the ability to grieve what they felt might be a discriminatory issue. And so in that case, I think it's okay because there is a union behind each employee at any rate. So if it did occur, then they can then take it to the grievance process.
I am going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Thank you. That carries. Thank you. All right. Now, before I introduce Mrs. Kaler one more time, I'm going to make a comment here. Before Mrs. Kaler gives us the background, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder because the recommendation says it should be received. We can do more than that tonight, and I'll come to that later after we receive the report, if you're in the mood to do it. I know it's late. So, Mrs. Kaler, can we have your insights? And I need a mover and a seconder for receiving. Councillor Patterson and Councillor Powell. So go ahead, Mrs. Kaler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as Council is aware, the federal government has announced that cannabis will become legal for both recreational and medicinal purposes starting next July. The federal government will regulate certain aspects with respect to quality control and minimum age limits, but the provinces will have autonomy over the retail and distribution model. The province has committed to engaging municipal governments and has established a joint committee with UBCM comprised of municipal elected officials and staff. As the province designs its regulatory framework for legalizing cannabis, it has identified several priority areas where consultation with municipalities is desired. These areas include the minimum age for consuming consuming recreational marijuana, personal possession limits, public consumption regulations, impaired driving and public safety regulations, personal cultivation limits, and the retail and distribution options. In addition, staff have identified revenue sharing as an additional item which Council may wish to discuss. When the provincial framework is further along in its design, cities should have more information on what specifically local governments will have the authority to regulate or prohibit in terms of licensing and land use. Council has already directed staff to investigate options for a regulatory regime at the local level, and staff will be bringing a report to Council in the new year outlining some of these options. The province has published a detailed discussion paper outlining the considerations and is asking for formal comment from municipalities by November 1st. This is to allow them sufficient time to prepare provincial legislation in time for the July 2018 go date. We were told last week by the ADM for local governments that we are likely not to hear from Cabinet until late in the spring. The date of April-May was thrown out there, which is a very tight timeline for us. Public engagement is also simultaneously underway through a provincial website, and individual citizens are encouraged to weigh in and provide their input by November 1st as well. The website is engage.gov.bc.ca/BC Cannabis Regulation. And so, given the tight timelines for comment, staff have prepared some draft wording to assist Council with designing some possible motions. Council may also wish to make additional motions, and it's recommended that Council may wish to consider each item separately to allow for discussion on the options that have been presented by the province.
So to receive the report, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of receiving the report? Now, what I would like to suggest, very gently, and I know it's late, but if we went through items A to G on pages 88 and 89, we could come to some consensus this evening. What's the appetite for that? Because it'll take a little bit of time. Councillor Powell.
I can understand wanting to go through them. There's things here that we don't have any say on, like the age limit. There are certain things in this list.
We do. We're making recommendations to the province.
Provincial. As a municipality, I'd much rather discuss what we're going to do as a municipality instead of provincially.
Well, what the province has asked us to do is give us the city's recommendations.
And there's at the UBCM, they are creating recommendations from when we were there. And tonight, it's almost 9:30, and to go through each one with 7 of us, we are going to be here till after midnight. So I don't support going through A to G.
Who feels the same way? Councillor Oates?
Move referral to the next council meeting.
That's not going to be acceptable because the deadline is November the 1st. So what I'm going to suggest is that councillors go home, look at items A to G, and let Ms. Kaler know what your preference is so we can give some kind of a consensus report from the City of Parksville. I'm for age 19. That's what the liquor license says, for example. But yes, Mrs. Kaler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could make a suggestion, perhaps if individual councillors could give me some feedback, what I could do is prepare a resolution for the next council meeting, which is on the 23rd, so that it would just require a vote and perhaps some short discussion if everyone kind of tells me in advance what they're looking for. We have a council meeting on October 23rd. Yeah.
We have a closed meeting to discuss the strategic plan in the
I forgot that we could do it then. Okay.
Yeah. So that if councillors could let me know kind of what they're thinking, I could try to put together a more definitive motion that has some of the feedback from councillors, if that would help.
Okay. Comments on what Mrs. Kaler just said. Councillor Beal?
Yeah, my question is, would it be helpful if we, in fact, referred to your itemized points here on page 90 to 91 and followed that format? That's what I was, to simplify it. And I do appreciate the way that's written out because I think it helps focus the thinking. Yeah, I think that A to G gives more of the background and fleshes that out, the sort of the behind the various options. But I think if we can put the wording in the way it is presented on 1991, that will really make the job a little bit easier for Mrs. Kaler.
Members of council, we have homework. Yes, Councillor Oates.
I think I heard what was requested, and then I heard what was suggested to do, and they both conflict. So, do you want us to go through A to G and pick out our options there, or do you want us to do the one on the other side, or do you want us to do both? I think going to A to G is the way to go because that has all the options there, and then from that you could craft a thing. The other one there, I guess we could do that as well too, but I'm not sure that I'm knowledgeable enough to know what possession limits are and all those other things.
Why don't we leave that up to the individual councillors? Personally, I'm going to do A to G also because I like it. I like it better. Okay. Thank you, council. And so don't forget the deadline, 23rd of October. All right. The next item, the next report is the fall 2017 grant and aid applications. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that is on the page. Do I have a mover and a seconder? I guess I have Councillor Salter and Councillor Patterson. Councillor Burden. Microphone, please.
My apologies. I would like to move